All right, guys, that was some great stuff. Uh, Shabbat Shalom, by the way, again for the second time tonight. Shabbat Shalom from Under the Dome, Hebrews and Hebrews. We, of course, are moving on, and we're going to be going through the Genesis Targum. We're on chapter 9, and of course, chapter 9 is loaded. Michael was absolutely correct. He emailed me or sent me a message earlier this week and told me that, and it was like, just wow, the stuff we're going to be covering tonight is some heavy. It's a very heavy topic, and it's one of those things that is not made known in Christianity if you've grown up and always wondered what the sin of Ham was. And tell you, just like with the Adam and Hava story, it straight out lays it out. And I'm not going to give it away now. We'll read it in a few minutes. I, I will say that hope everyone had a good Sabbath today. And I was telling the group before we started that I have my precious little baby daughter, and she's not really newborn anymore. She's 6 weeks old, and she's starting to kind of mature. Her face is definitely mature, and she's starting to like follow you across the room and just stare at you. And um she's kind of trying to reach and grab for things. And she was down on the carpet on the rug today making the most adorable gurgling sounds. And she, for the first time, like, discovered a we have this, stuffed animal that I bought for her before she was born, and we didn't know if she was gonna be a boy or girl. And we could not decide for the longest time whether this is a raccoon, a squirrel, a cat, a dog, or a fox. It's kinda like they're making toys now to be, like, gender whatever, whatever they identify, neutral, animals, whatever. I kinda think it looks like a squirrel. My wife thinks it's a fox. But anyways, for the first time today, she reached, her hands out and started touching it and kinda knocking it over. And, like, she was just obsessed with it, and it was the most adorable thing ever. So I'm like, I could be studying right now for tonight, or I could be watching the most beautiful, adorable little baby, play on the rug. And, so we'll see how this I'm just giving everyone a warning that, the baby was on my mind today. And, but I'm excited to be here and go through the Targum with you guys, and I think it'll be a really good study nonetheless. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to read from chapter 9. Usually I have Michael read. I'm just gonna go ahead and read it tonight, and then I'll give Michael the first commentary and let him dig into it and introduce himself. I'm always very excited, that Michael is here, and he puts in a lot of work. I know every single week on these studies, and he brings up points that I'd never thought of before, and I'm always very encouraged by that. And very rarely do we steal each other's thunder or trample on each other. I think we had a little bit of that last week, and undoubtedly we will this week because it's pretty straightforward. But here we go. Chapter 9 of the Genesis Targum. I'm, of course, reading from the Targum Jonathan. And Yahuwah blessed Noah and his sons and said to them, Spread forth and multiply and replenish the earth. And the fear of you and the dread of you shall be upon every beast of the earth and on every fowl of the heavens, of all that the earth swarmeth forth, and all the fishes of the sea. Into your hand are they delivered. Every morning, every moving thing which liveth to you shall be for food. As the green herb have I given to you the whole. But flesh, which is torn of the living beast, what time the life is in it, or that torn from a slaughtered animal before all the breath has gone forth, you shall not eat. But the blood of your lives I will require of every animal which hath killed a man. I will require that it be put to death on his account. And from the hand of the human being, from the hand of the man who hath shed the blood of his brother, will I require the life of a man. Whoso sheddeth the blood of man, the judges by witnesses shall condemn him unto death. But he who sheddeth it without witnesses, Yahuwah of the world will bring punishment on him in the day of the great judgment, because in the image of Yahuwah he made man. And you, spread yourselves abroad and multiply, bring forth in the earth and increase in it. And Yahuwah spake to Noah and to his sons with him, saying, I, behold, I establish my covenant with you and with your children after you. and with every living soul that is with you, of birds and of cattle and of every beast of the earth that is with you, of all that go forth from the ark, of every beast of the earth. And I will establish my covenant with you, and will not again cause all flesh to perish by the waters of a flood, and there shall not again be a flood to destroy the earth. And Yahuwah said, This is the sign of the covenant which I establish between my word and between you and every living soul that is with you until the generations of the world. I have set my bow in the cloud, and it shall be for a token of the covenant between my word and the earth. And it shall be that when I spread forth my glorious cloud over the earth, the bow shall be seen in the daytime, while the sun is not sunk or hidden in a cloud. And I will remember my covenant which is between my word and between you and every living soul of all flesh, that there shall not be the waters of a flood to destroy all flesh. And the bow shall be in the cloud, and I will look upon it to remember the everlasting covenant between the word of Yahuwah and every living soul of all flesh that is upon the earth. And Yahuwah said to Noah, This is the sign of the covenant that I have covenanted between my word and between the word for all flesh that is upon the earth. And the sons of Noah who went forth from the ark were Shem, Ham, and Japheth, or Japheth, and Cham is the father of Canaan. These are the three sons of Noah, and from them they were spread abroad to dwell in all the earth. And Noah began to be a man working in the earth, and he found a vine which the river had brought away from the Garden of Eden, and he planted it in a vineyard, and it flourished in a day. And its grapes became ripe, and he pressed them out, and he drank of the wine and was drunken, and he made himself naked in the midst of his tent. And Ham, the father of Canaan, beheld the nakedness of his father, and showed it to his brethren without. And Shem and Japheth took a mantle and bare it upon the shoulders of each, and went backward and covered the nakedness of their father. And their faces were turned back, and the nakedness of their father they did not behold. And Noah awoke from his wine and knew by the relation of a dream what had been done to him by Ham his son, who was inferior in worth on the account that he had begotten a fourth son. And he said, Accursed is Canaan, who is his fourth son. A serving servant shall he be to his brethren. And he said, Blessed be Yahuwah, the Elohim of Shem, whose work is righteous, and therefore shall Canaan be servant unto him. Yahuwah shall beautify the borders of Japheth, and his sons shall be proselyted and dwell in the schools of Shem, and Canaan shall be a servant to them. And Noah lived after the deluge 350 years. And all the days of Noah were 950 years, and he died. Thus concludes Genesis chapter 9 of the Aramaic Targum. I'm handing it over to Michael.
All right, Shabbat Shalom, everyone. I had a busy week. Something new that happened this week for me was my Shabbat group. You know, they do the typical study, fellowship, food, music, but then at the very end, they do a 30-minute teaching. Someone gives a 30-minute teaching, and this week was was my turn, and I am not a public speaker. I don't know how I even do this, but maybe because you're not looking at me. But so yeah, I was mentally drained studying for that all week as well. In addition to this, so like Noel said, we have a lot of good stuff to get into, and let's go. I will start at number one, and let me post my first comment here. Boom. So Noah blessed Noah and his sons and said unto them, Be fruitful and multiply and replenish the earth. And as you can see, word study time, that word multiply is used 5 times in Genesis, and we've already read all of them, right? Nothing, there's only one, it's only used one other time past this time. So Genesis 1, you have, you know, the creation of the whole heavens and earth. Genesis 9, you have the flood and the new creation after the flood. The only other time it's used, and this was really good. Jeremiah 29, Thus says the Lord of hosts, Yah of Israel, to all the exiles whom I have sent into exile from Jerusalem to Babylon. Build houses, live in them, plant gardens, eat their produce, take wives and become the fathers of sons and daughters. Take wives for your sons and give your daughters to husbands, that they may bear sons and daughters and multiply there and do not decrease. Seek the welfare of the city where I have sent you into exile and pray to Yahuwah on its behalf. For its welfare you have welfare. And so it kind of blew me away and hit me. I would always say, you know, the be fruitful and multiply were for reset events. And up until this study, I never even noticed this Jeremiah one. And this is showing us how we are supposed to live in exile in Babylon. And it was just like, boom, okay. Um, we are supposed to live there, take wives, become sons and daughters, bear sons, multiply there, do not decrease. That's a specific command in the prophets, and I thought that was awesome. So yeah, second word study on replenish. And so again, it's not used that much. So it's used in Genesis 1, so the same. So Genesis 1:22, fill the waters. So be fruitful and multiply and fill the waters. Genesis 1:28, fill the earth. Be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth. Okay, Ezekiel 43. So it's also used this time as well. So for 7 days you shall prepare a daily goat for a sin offering. Also a young bull and a ram from the flock without blemish shall be prepared. For 7 days they shall make atonement for the altar and purify it, so that they consecrate or cleanse the altar or consecrate it. When they have completed the days, it shall be on the 8th day and onward. The priest shall offer your burnt offerings on the altar and peace and your peace offerings, and I will accept you, declares the Lord God. So 3 out of the 4 verses, Genesis 1:22, Genesis 1:28, Genesis 9:1, the word means fulfill or replenish. But then in Ezekiel, it means consecrate the altar. I thought that was pretty cool. Cleansing the altar. Same with filling the waters, replenishing. I'll do one more and hand off to Noel. Number 2, it says, and the fear of you and the dread of you shall be upon every beast of the earth, and upon every fowl of the air, upon all that moveth upon the earth, and upon all the fishes of the sea into your hand are they to be delivered. In other words, so that word, the fear of, and the fear of you. So who was given Noah, they will all look upon him in fear. All that move upon the earth, all the fishes of the sea, they'll still have that dread. So Deuteronomy 11, starting at 22, for if you are careful to keep all this commandment, which I am commanding you today, key, to love the Lord your God, walk in all his ways, and hold fast to him, then Yahuwah will drive out all these nations from before you, and you will dispossess nations greater and mightier than you. Every place in which the sole of your foot treads shall be yours. Your border will be from the wilderness to Lebanon, and from the river Euphrates, as far as the western sea. Now here's the key. No man will be able to stand before you. That Yahuwah, your Elohim, will lay the dread of you and the fear of you on all the land on which you set foot, that he has spoken with you. So again, after the flood, the fear, the animals are talking about, and the fowl of the air, that they will have fear of you. And then in Deuteronomy, the same word is used when we are obeying his commands. No man will be able to stand before you. They will have fear of you on all the land on which you set your foot. What do you guys think about that? I thought that was cool. Switching from the animals to the man, and I'm assuming it's not scared fear, but I don't know. What do you guys think about that? I have a lot, but I'll hand off to Noel.
All right. Well, I dropped a chart in here, and Josh, I don't know if you can pick this up. And I always found this really fascinating. And years ago, I would look at charts like this, and I would find them very unsettling because I would ask questions like, how is it that for all of human history, we don't have a population growth until about 1800, and then boom, it just explodes. It just skyrockets. Look at that. It's like I mean, NASA can't even shoot up shuttles like that straight up and to the sky. It always arches back over, right? Well, now here we see starting in it's oh man, this one. Let me get to one other chart where you can see it a little bit better, and this one is more specific to the year 1800. And you see here that China and India just really, like, if the command is that we're to populate the earth, then China and India are fulfilling their end of the bargain, or their end of the commands. But you could see, of course, the United States and all the others, and it's really explosion that happens after 1800. It's closer to 1850, and all of a sudden, it just takes off. It's like, well, what was happening? So we go from what is it, about 200 million people to well, really way beyond below that, but now it's upwards of the billions, right? So it, I really, when I look at the world around us right now, and I'll just go ahead and say it for the study. I think most people here are, understand exactly what this means. Is we have a mud flood event, we have a reset events where there are very few people on the earth, and then within just a very short span of time, less than 200 years, really 160 years, the earth explodes with population. And so think about that now in Adam and Eve's day, but then also in Noah's day. Now, with Noah and his family is a little bit different because it was just one family. And in the 1800s, we still had more than one family. There was, people all across the earth. But in the following chapters, when we're going into chapter 10 versus chapter 11, we're getting into the Tower of Babel events, and then we're going to get into the Genesis war between Nimrod and with the kings of Canaan and King Og and all that. We're going to I think we're seeing something very, very similar. In fact, when I look around at the world, with all that's happening with CERN, and I don't need to go into all of that. You guys know what I'm talking about. I feel like we are in Genesis 9 through 11, 12, 13 all over again. I feel like the world is a very similar place to be. So I just wanted to kind of throw that out there. And let's see, what do we have here? In that was, of course, the first one. I don't need to repeat that again. I guess I'm on verse two. And if I was trying to listen, if Michael already stated this, I apologize, but there's a interesting contrast between Genesis 9:2 and Genesis 1:28. Or yeah. And here's what it says. Again, I'll repeat verse 2. It says, "And the fear of you and the dread of you shall be upon every beast of the earth, and on every fowl of the heavens, of all that the earth swarmeth forth, and all the fish of the sea, into your hands they are delivered." Well, here's what Genesis 1:28 says. Now, keep in mind, this is when man and woman are created. This is not necessarily Adam. We went through that in the early studies. If you believe this is Adam and Eve, that's totally cool. I'm not going to argue that, but the idea might be that this is just man in general. And Genesis 1:28, this is the end of the original creation week. And he blessed them, and Yahuwah said to them, "Increase and multiply, and fill the earth with sons and daughters, and prevail over it in its possessions." But here's what I want to focus on: "And have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the heavens, and over every creeping animal that creepeth upon the ground." Now, the command to rule over the animals is different from the original version. Instead of merely commanding Noah to subdue the earth, Elohim tells Noah and company that the animals will fear them. He doesn't say that in Genesis 1. Mankind was never given that piece of information prior. So some interpret this to mean that prior to the flood, animals did not fear man. Others suggest that this simply reinforces the hostile, difficult nature of survival in the post world flood, which I kind of think both may be true. Contextually, we see in a few verses that animals who don't fear man will be put to death. That in turn, you can think about like the movie Jaws. The plot line was a big shark comes and it eats a boy, and so they have to go hunt the shark, and they actually catch the wrong shark, and you guys all know the plot. Or you can think of like a bear in the woods goes and mauls someone, they have to go out and they have to kill it afterwards. So in a way that this the Gentiles at Goyim are actually, if they're doing this, they're actually keeping to what Yahuwah commanded. Um, so that in turn will create more fear in other animals. If the other animals are saying, "Oh, dude, anyone who comes up goes up against the humans are getting knocked off," kind of causes them to, kind of run away from us. But then but then also look at how humanity has dominated nature today. So we see that, um, I'm here in the Charleston region. The Low Country of the Carolinas is beautiful with all the swamps and the grass and the grand oak trees with the Spanish moss hanging down. It's gloriously beautiful. But in the several years that we have lived here, we have seen houses go up just indiscriminately everywhere, just buildings, everything, just destroying the land, and it's tragically sad. And we're seeing the animals, they have a fear of man. That seems to be, it's kind of like a no dub. That seems to be what he's stating here. That there is that the animals would fear the total dominance that man would have when they come off the ark. Um, and all right, I'm going to leave the next section up to Michael to take it next because I think this is really controversial, and also I want to see what he has to say about it because this is actually I think that there's like two really controversial things in this chapter, and the people really argue about on all sides. And I think we're about to hit it. So, Michael, back to you. I'll let you
Uh, I
tomatoes and
might
stones.
I might not be as controversial as you think. um, so I want to say you're talking about number three. So I don't have much. I could have gone a huge rabbit hole like you were saying, but I did not. So every moving thing that liveth shall be meat for you, even as the green herb have I given you all these things. Now, not, I don't necessarily agree with this, but I found a commentary that said that the notice is given that meat from animals can now be used for food in the same way that plants were given previously. This does not necessarily mean that people had not eaten meat up to this point, but only that now the killing of animals for food was divinely permitted. What do you guys think about that? Um, I yeah, I don't know. I don't know. But before I elaborate more, Stephanie found this. The Septuagint is very interesting. This passage. It says, "And every reptile which is living shall be to you for meat. I have given all things to you as the green herbs." Every reptile. It literally says that. What do you guys think about that? I'm kind of tongue twisted here. I don't even know where to begin. Maybe I can comment on what Noel says. But my guess was they were eating meat before this. Um, if the law was always there and all that, the sacrifices and all that. Number 5, it says, "But the blood of your lives will I require of every animal which hath killed a man. I will I will require that it to be put to death on his account. And from the hand of the human being, from the hand of the man who hath shed the blood of his brother, will I require the life of the man." Um, okay, so another commentary. This is more of a midrash. Take that with a grain of salt. But I'm going to open it up and ask for questions here because they say, "And surely your blood of your lives will I require." So that part, the very first part, to support the proposition that one who commits suicide is considered an evildoer of the highest degree. They taught that the Jews should not carry out for one who committed suicide anything to honor that person, but the Jews should bury the body after cleansing and dressing it in a shroud. What do you guys think about that? Suicide, that's an interesting topic within this community. What do you guys think about that? If I just had to take a guess, I would still say it's a hard issue. I don't know. I don't see anything that directly says if they do. But yeah, obviously you're in a bad place. I'll stop at 6. I got one more and I'll stop at 6. "Whoso sheddeth man's blood, by man shall his blood be shed. For in the image of Yah made he man." Palestinian says, "Who sheddeth the blood of man," look how different it is, "the judges, by witnesses, shall condemn him unto death. But he who sheddeth it without witnesses, the Lord of the world will bring punishment on him in a day of great judgment, because in the image of the Lord he made man." Um, uh, so more midrash commentary. Again, I'm trying to find different views from different people, Christians, early first century, just to kind of give you what their thought process is. All they say on this one is they taught that upon rising in the morning, one should wash one's face in honor of one's creator, as Genesis 9:6 says, "From the image of Yah made he man." So that's what they say on that. Okay, so the infamous Noahide laws. I wanted to put it here. What do you guys make about that? So the rabbis interpreted Genesis 9 to set forth 7 Noahide laws binding on all people. So to set up courts of justice, not to commit adultery, not to commit blasphemy, not to commit sexual immorality, not to commit bloodshed, not to commit robbery, not to eat flesh cut from a living animal. Um, Again, this is more, in my opinion, rabbinic stuff because I don't see that reading Genesis 9. I see a few. I don't see all those. I think they're adding into the text per se. Jubilees, so they say, during my research on this, the book of Jubilees, some people say this is talking about the Noahide laws. So Jubilees chapter 7, 20 through 25. In the 28th Jubilee, Noah began to enjoin upon his sons, the ordinances and the commandments, and all the judgments that he knew. And he exhorted his sons to observe righteousness, and to cover the shame of their flesh, and to bless their Creator, and honor father and mother, and love their neighbor, and guard their souls from fornication and uncleanness, and all iniquity. For owing to these three things came upon the flood upon the earth. For whoso sheddeth man's blood, and whoso eateth the blood of any flesh, shall all be destroyed. So again, some people say that this is talking about it. Again, I don't really see it. What do you guys think about this? To me, it seems like a stretch, primarily rabbinic, but I thought this was a good place to enter in the Noahide law discussion. And do you guys really see that cracking down on us or anything like that? Take notes, and when we open it up, love to hear it. I'll hand it off to Noel now.
Noahide laws. So I remember when I came over to the Torah a few years back, the hot topic amongst truthers at the time was the Noahide laws, which, the Zionists are going to apparently enforce upon the whole world. And I think it had to do at the time with like Trump being King Cyrus or whatever. And, that it was like the Zionist enforcement of the no hide laws was supposed to happen at any moment. And I don't want to put my foot in my mouth here, but well, okay. So one of the accusations that people would throw my way is, that, oh no, he's obeying the Torah now. He's going to fall for the Antichrist. When the Antichrist shows up, he's gonna help enforce the Noahide laws. And I'm just like, you guys are crazy. Like this is what does Noahide laws have to do with the Torah? Like whatever. But the thing is, and this is where I'm gonna put my foot in my mouth, is that when you these so-called Noahide laws, if the as Michael said, if these really truly exist, um, it's like, don't murder, don't commit adultery, don't eat the flesh off living animals, like, you have a problem with that? Like, you want people to murder? Like, I don't know. I feel like that's a this is coming from Yahuwah, keep in mind. He's saying, like, "Don't do these things." That seems pretty good to me. Now, the only thing that, you'll get on is the Noahide laws is the blasphemy because, it's true that if the Zionists who, they by the way, I believe Zionism is just a pet project of the Roman Catholic Church, but if the Zionists were to enforce a Noahide law on the world, I could see where blasphemy could be. If you declare Yahusha to be Messiah, that could be blasphemy against the Most High. I could see that angle, but that's just my 2 cents on it. I'm going to throw that out there. And okay, so Genesis 3, and this is the hotly debated verse. I mean, this comes up a lot. Genesis 9:3 is used to show that all animals are on the menu: gorilla, kitten, puppy, you name it. Apparently, according to the LXX, reptiles as well. I didn't good catch, Michael, or was it Stephanie? That's a good catch. I don't know. Maybe that's maybe that's where the dinosaurs went extinct. They cooked them up and ate them all. Actually, if you read the book of King Og, I mentioned this book a lot because it really is a fascinating read. It's a fascinating glimpse into the ancient world. He talks about these dragon herds. He calls them giant lizards. He and that they would that they ran around the earth. These giant lizards, and he would hunt and eat them. So maybe there you go. Maybe they really did eat them up and cook them up. Um, But most people, however, when asked, don't know there were 7 pairs of clean animals on the ark, totaling 14 in all. We went over that last week and the week before that, and that comes mainly from Genesis 7:1, but there's another reference in the Targum where it mentions that as well. Uh, Most people think there were 2 pairs of all animals, no qualifiers, because that's what they were taught growing up in Sunday school and big church. I was too. I was taught that. And so I would read Genesis repeatedly and I never saw it. I would just skim right over it. I never put it together. Wait, there's clean animals? And there were 14 of them? It, so, anyways, yeah. So regardless, the passage is still hotly debated, even among the rabbis today. And so what I find fascinating here is the Targums total silence on the issue. Seriously, like this is one of those things when I was reading the Targum for the first time, and it's just blowing my mind on all the things it's expounding on or talking about. Total silence here. Just they didn't even like they had if the point of this is to just create some sort of system that didn't exist, you think that they would totally throw that in right here. And by the way, however this plays out, and there's nothing here about clean or unclean where I would expect there to be. Verses 5 through 6 are very Torah centric and in line with what we see there, putting an animal down to death that has killed a man, like if an ox scores somebody, that sort of thing. No killing other humans nor consuming any creature with its life still in it, which is the blood. I, for one, don't believe Noah would have eaten unclean animals. Many are inclined to conclude that Elohim is putting all food on the menu for humanity in general. Again, the LXX does make a good case with all reptiles, but but that he is making a set apart nation which is to adhere to cleanliness. I wouldn't have a problem with that, except that Psalm 82 implies that even the surrounding nations were supposed to be taught the Torah. Again, Christians love this verse because they use it to justify their lifestyle. They're just keeping to the Noahide laws. Dun dun dun. But I find it to be one of the most conflicting verses in the whole scripture, as it is really rather vague. And by the way, it does not line up with the popular mouse and swine flesh passage in Isaiah chapter 66, which reads, "They that sanctify themselves and purify themselves in the gardens behind one tree in the midst, eating swine's flesh." And the abomination and the mouse shall be consumed together, says Yahuwah. They'll actually be consumed with fire. So at his um at his return, when he's coming to make all things right, he's got an issue with people eating swine flesh. He's got an issue with people eating the mouse. Those are both unclean animals. So it is what it is. Now, one of the things I did kind of read in the rabbinical comments, and again, people reading this like they don't even know what to make of this. And so I'd be curious to get your guys' point of view. They'll talk about how I don't really agree with this, but some of the rabbis will say that the morality was at such a low point that it's like Yahuwah was just lowering his bar of his standards, and I don't think he ever lowers his standards. And particularly if you had just one family, it's not like there's thousands of people coming into the new earth. It's just one family coming off a boat. And he's like, you could, eat, according to LXX, you just eat some lizards if you want some lizards. You see those, but that being said, too, guys, like, think about the awkwardness of the situation. You're on this ark with all these animals and you get to know them after a while. Like, have you ever kept a pet? Or I mean, you bring in like an animal, like a farm animal, and the saying is you don't ever name it, because once you name it, it becomes a pet. And so you'd hope that they didn't name these animals or whatever. But the animals are on the ark with them, and Yah's like, it's up, they're up on the menu now. So and anyways, interesting transition in history, and I don't have the answers on this. This is one of, like I said, this is one of those passages that is the most confused to me to read the rest of scriptures and see that there are clean, unclean animals even before this, right? Unclean animals and clean animals were not invented at Sinai; they go back before the flood. And I'll be here interested to hear what you guys have to say on it. Back to you, Michael.
All right. Yeah, I definitely want to open that discussion up later. I don't know how far you got. I don't think he went too far. So I'm going to start on 9. I don't have any on 7 or 8. So KGV says, "And I behold, I establish my covenant with you and with your seed after you." So that word, your seed, if you cannot tell, a lot of word studies in this chapter. They really stick out. So that word, your seed, used twice in Exodus 32:13. "Remember Abraham, Isaac, and Yasharel, your servants to whom you swore by yourself, and say to them, I will multiply your descendants as the stars of the heaven, and all this land of which I have spoken I will give to your descendants, and they shall inherit it forever." So Genesis 9, he's establishing a covenant, and with your seed. Same word in Exodus 32, Abraham, Isaac, Yasharel. Then Leviticus 22 says, I don't have the verse, I don't think. Or that might have been the verse. I don't have the chapter. Then Yahuwah spoke to Moses, saying, Tell Aaron and his sons to be careful with the holy gifts of the sons of Israel, which they dedicate to me, so as to not profane my holy name. I am Yahuwah Elohim. Say to them, if any man among your descendants or your seed throughout your generations approaches the holy gifts which the sons of Israel dedicate to the Lord while he has an uncleanness, that person shall be cut off from me. I am Yahuwah. Again, so this is another covenant typed verse. Remember Abraham, Isaac, and Israel? Then Yahuwah spoke to Moses, saying, Tell Aaron, and it's talking about the priesthood. That's interesting. That's where Yeshua comes in and did it correctly. That if your descendants throughout your generation approach the holy gifts which the sons of Israel dedicate, while he has an uncleanness, that person should be cut off. That's pretty interesting. Leviticus 26 talks about 14. But if you do not obey me and observe all these commands, if you reject my statutes, despise my ordinances, and do not observe all my commands, and break my covenant, again, another covenant reference, then I will do this to you. I will bring terror on you, wasting disease and fever that will cause your eyes to fail and your life to ebb away. You will sow your seed in vain because your enemies will eat it. That word sow your seed is the same as your seed in Genesis 9. But again, it's just obedience. Noah obeyed, his seed is blessed. Abraham, Isaac, Yasharel obeyed, their seed is blessed. Aaron and his sons did not obey, they were not blessed. And Leviticus, same thing. If you do not obey, your seed will be in vain. And then Isaiah 66, this is the prophetic verse and this is interesting, for just as the new heavens and the new earth, which I make, will endure before me, declares Yahuwah, so will your descendants and your name endure. So that word descendants is your seed. And so this is new heavens and new earth. This is post, if you believe new heavens and new earth come after the 1,000 years, there's descendants. What do you guys make of that? I keep going back and forth. There's so many verses in both camps that talk about this, and that I don't know. I have to do a very deep study on this, but it's saying your descendants and your name will endure after the new heavens and new earth. I don't know. I'll stop at 9 and hand it back to Noel.
Well, so when I talked earlier today about spending time with Rivka, I had a decision to make. Do I do research on rainbows or my daughter? So I don't have a lot on rainbows, and maybe it was just one of those things that a lot of us here, I think probably everyone in the room, probably most people listening out there are of the flats. They're the inhabiting the flat realm, the flat motionless plane with us, and we have done a lot of look see loo into rainbows. I will throw out this one interesting passage that came about during our Revelation study when we went through Hebrew Revelations, and let's see if I can pull this up. No, I'm not going to be reading from the Hebrew Revelations. It's just your common like KJV. And it says this. Then I saw another mighty angel coming down from heaven, wrapped in a cloud with a rainbow above his head. His face was like the sun, and his legs were like pillars of fire. And my original idea at that time was that this was just a random angel. I think I had made maybe connections even to maybe like Uriel or something like that. I can't remember what the connection was at that time. And it was at that time Michael and also Rob's understanding that this may have been Yahushua Messiah. And it's just really interesting to see that he is has a rainbow around him, because what we are seeing in here is that the covenant, the everlasting covenant, like it says in verse 16 here, and the bow shall be in the cloud, and I will look upon it to remember the everlasting covenant between the word of Yahuwah and every living soul of all flesh that is upon the earth. And so that right there is, of course, Yahusha. He is the one that is the high priest, the intercessor between the Most High and us, and so he's the one that carries the bow with him. And I think that's a really beautiful thought. One last thing, just a quick transition here, is that I have talked, and you guys know all this. I mean, we have talked a lot in this group about the transition from water to fire, and so here we clearly see that Yahuwah has changed his strategy, and he says that he will no longer destroy the whole. That the key is the whole earth. He doesn't say like I won't destroy, say, a city or you know something like that with water, but he will not destroy the whole earth with water anymore. That his new um, form of judgment is fire, his new preferred judgment. He has now made the transition, which we see with Sodom and Gomorrah, and then we see again, and I have put forward the idea that we can see a massive heat index event all across the world, that we see melted cities and uh, whole perhaps mountains that may have been buildings at one time that are melted, destroyed by fire, which are not talked about in history. And it's like, what's going on there? You guys know my thoughts on that. But it's interesting because the idea that he destroyed the earth with water wasn't a one time event. I'm fully convinced that he had destroyed the earth many times with water. That, of course, Genesis 1 1, as you guys know, was a recreation event. And then I pointed out in Jasher where it said that before the flood, he destroyed a third of the entire earth with water, a huge flood that came, and still they didn't repent. So just kind of interesting to see now we're in the transition. And that's all I have on that. Michael, I'm sure you have plenty on the rainbow. I'm going to hand it over to you, and then I'll just start going down the grapevine.
All right, sounds great. Okay, before I get to the rainbow, the only thing I'm going to point out from 12, 15, and 16 is how it's way different from the KJV. It mentions my word, my word, Yahuwah, or Yahusha, and the word of the Lord. And so I just want to read those real quick. So number 12 says, and Yahuwah said, this is the sign of the covenant, which I establish between my word and between you and every living soul that is with you. Again, Masoretic takes that stuff out. 15 says, and I'll remember my covenant, which is between my word and between you and every living soul of all flesh. Again, Masoretic takes it out. And number 16, and the bow shall be in the cloud, and I will look upon it to remember the everlasting covenant between the word of the Lord and every living soul. So, again, just, not saying the Targum's, unblemished by any means, but it does highlight the word of the Lord way more than the Masoretic took out. All right, rainbow time. And it shall come to pass, number 14, when I bring a cloud over the earth, that the bow shall be seen in the cloud. And Palestinian says, and it shall be that when I spread forth my glorious cloud over the earth, the bow shall be seen in the daytime, while the sun is not sunk or hidden in a cloud. Okay. There, so rainbow, arch, cachette. So after the great flood, Yahuwah establishes a covenant with Noah, promising he shall never bring another flood again that will destroy the lives of humans, animals, cattle, and birds. The sign of the covenant will be a rainbow that will come with a cloud, and whenever Yah sees the rainbow, he shall remember the everlasting covenant. So, gematria time. So, where's Jason at? The interesting thing is the gematria of the word kashet, which is written in Hebrew in the letters Kof, Shin, Tav. Those letters create the sum of 800. For Kof equals 100, Shin equals 300, Tav equals 4. So the word kashet in Hebrew has the value of 800. I don't know, I just thought that was cool. You know me, I'm a numbers guy. And obviously, the number 8, has many significance, the great eighth day, all that kind of stuff, circumcision, new beginnings. And so I thought that was pretty cool that the rainbow had that numerology. So this chapter in Genesis 9, Genesis 9 talks about the rainbow as we're talking about it now, like the actual rainbow of the many colors. 13, 14, and 16 talk about that. Ezekiel 128 is the only other place in the Old Testament that mentions the word as a rainbow. That's pretty cool. Every other time it's like a bow and arrow. So what do you guys make about that? That it's literally this chapter and then Ezekiel 128. I'd have to do a deeper research on that chapter, but I thought that was an interesting fact there. Number 15, it says, I will remember my covenant, which is between me and you and every living creature of all flesh, and the water shall no more become a flood to destroy all flesh. A similar usage is found in Exodus 2:24, where Yah hears the cries of the Israelites in bondage in Egypt and remembered his covenant. So I just found that to be interesting. Okay, so number 17. Last week I mentioned chiastic structure, and I want to talk about it again with this Noah story. Look at this. This is pretty cool. Did that not go through? Wait, there it is. Okay, so all right, if you want to read along. So chiastic structure of the Genesis flood narrative. So Noah and his sons, all life on earth, curse on earth, flood announced, ark, all living creatures, food, animals in man's hands, entering the ark, waters increase. Yah remembers Noah, waters decrease, exiting the ark, animals, food, all living creatures, ark, no flood in the future, blessings on earth, all life on earth, Noah and his sons. Amazing. Chiastic structures of the Bible. Awesome. I would look more into that. Okay, so I'll do one more and then hand it off to Noah. Um, I butcher this name, the Noahic covenant. Noah, I see. Noahic covenant. Um, what are the three promises Yah declares? So he says, "Never again will I curse the ground because of man, even though every inclination of his heart is evil. Never again will I destroy all living creatures as I have done. As long as the earth endures, seed time and harvest, cold and heat, summer and winter, day and night will never cease." Two of those were chapter 8, and then 9:15 was the second one. So Noah and his generations were required in their turn to procreate, not shed human blood, because mankind is made in the image of Yah. In addition, man was forbidden to consume meat with blood in it, so the blood must be drained from the animals before consuming. But the covenant that Yah makes with Noah is unique because Yah gives Noah a promise, but doesn't require anything from Noah in light of this promise. When Yah made a covenant with Adam, Adam was given one rule. When Yah made a covenant with Abraham, Abraham was required to follow Yah. Even with God, or even when Yah gave us the new covenant through the blood of Yeshua, we are required to accept it through faith and repentance. But Noah is given no such requirement. He is not bound in any way to accept the covenant. The covenant is entirely one-sided. Granted, and this says, granted, all of the covenants are mostly, sided, but we needed to respond where Noah didn't have to. And so this is cool. So a covenant is a binding agreement between two or more parties. And there are three types of covenants. There's a kinship covenant, there's a suzerain vassal covenant, and then there's a royal grant covenant. So kinship, agreement between two equal parties with a few stipulations or requirements. Marriage, selling property, business agreements. That's a kinship. Suzerain vassal. So that's a king would make a promise to his subjects, or a treaty between kings would be that depended on obedience to specific terms. You can think of this covenant as a conditional promise. And then here's Noah, the royal grant. So unlike the suzerain vassal agreements, a royal grant requires no action on the part of the beneficiary. It is an unconditional promise given from one party to the other. The only downside to a grant covenant is missing out on the promises. So Noah, Abraham, and Yeshua have royal grant covenants from Yah. Moses and the nation of Israel were in suzerain vassal covenants. Like I said, there's no requirement in a grant covenant, just a promise. All Noah had to do was believe Yah and follow his instructions. Well, I don't know about that, but okay. So some more on the royal grant covenants. They were special covenants that the king or the suzerain made with exceptional rulers under them. The king granted the ruler a gift or land as a reward for his precious demonstration of loyalty. These two types of covenants can be combined into one under the idea of probation. A ruler can be placed under a suzerain vassal covenant, but with the promise that after successfully demonstrating their loyalty over a period of time, they may receive a greater reward. So, there's a million things going in my head right now. Does this sound familiar? What is one of our main promises? It's the land. It's heaven come down. It's New Jerusalem. Do these things. Believe and obey. That's a suzerain, a king. King makes a promise to his subjects. But then, a royal grant is just, there's no action. It's just a beneficiary. I just think about it in today's terms. It's just like, you make your life insurance policy a beneficiary. They did absolutely nothing. And if you die, they gain the reward. I thought that was cool. If you guys want to do more research, I'm going to post that. And I'll hand it off to Noel.
All right, this is the the part I've been talking about for weeks, and I've been kind of highlighting a little bit about the grapes and saying I was going to put it off to this week. I'm excited about this. This is the big moment. I can't mess this up. I can't trip over this. And so I'm going to be jumping ahead of Michael here and talking about the grapes and the Garden of Eden and so on, and the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And this is what it says in Genesis 9:20 through 21 in the Targum. And Noah began to be a man working in the earth, which is interesting in and of itself. No commentary on that, but that does right there seem to line up with a lot of the Adamic literature that would say that the sons of Seth were not tillers of the earth; that they were actually eating the fruit off the trees. They were vegetarians. They would just pluck, fruit, bananas or apples or oranges, berries, whatever they could find. And, which is interesting too, because that's something that we later read in the Ascension of Isaiah, that the prophets, I think it was Amos and Yeshayahu and a couple others, they just lived off the berries on the hillsides, which is kind of interesting. And he found a vine which the river had brought away from the Garden of Eden. Something is telling me here that Noah was not eating those lizards in the LXX. And he planted it in a vineyard, and it flourished in a day, and its grapes became ripe, and he pressed them out. All right. I've mentioned this several times to the point that some of you guys are going to roll your eyes, but there are new people here tonight. And, nerd alert, I do find it really fascinating that's in the land, the merry old land of Israel, where Jerusalem is. And I know that there's a whole debate about whether this is the true land or not. Right outside of Jerusalem, they have, right actually, the city of David, Mount Zion, where the true temple was. They have found the, Melchizedek temple, what they claim to be a Melchizedek temple. What's fascinating about this is that they found in there, its main feature. The main feature of this Melchizedek, temple was to press grapes and make wine. Well, isn't that interesting? Because when you jump over and read the writings of Abraham, um, when Abraham he meets Noah at the temple there, the Melchizedek temple in Zion. Noah comes out, and it says that he basically never really left the temple. He just made wine all day, and so for the rest of his days, he just was in there making wine. And so that's what the Melchizedek temple seems to show in Jerusalem. Really interesting. I had like a nerd alert because I'm like, that's like, that's where Noah pressed grapes, like that's pretty awesome. Anyways, so these grapes, he gets them from, don't miss the part, he gets them from the Garden of Eden, and they flourished in a single day. So this is like Jack and the Beanstalk stuff right here. And he drank of the wine and was drunken. That's not good. And he made himself naked in the midst of his tents. Now, I'm not going to be commenting on the nakedness in and of itself so much right now, but what I want to do is jump over to Third Baruch. And I have quoted from this several times in the past, but it's fascinating because it mirrors this whole passage. And and eh, Third Baruch, I need to do really more research on what the scholars claim. You guys know my opinion that I'm not really concerned with the scholars always say, but it is my understanding that Third Baruch is more of a Christian writing, right? Well, the reason I find that really fascinating is because by all accounts, the Aramaic Targum was not circulated amongst the Christians, and it was more of a Jewish thing. So you see what I'm saying here, the discrepancies. All right, and here's what it says. Now, again, context is that Baruch is in the third heaven where paradise is. So he has gone to the Garden of Eden. He's with an angel as his guide. And he says, I pray thee show me which is the tree which led Adam astray. So Baruch is asking the angel, can you show me the tree of knowledge of good and evil? And here's the big shocking moment. And the angel says to me, it is the vine. The vine. So he's saying it's grapes. But not just that. He says, which the angel Samael planted. Wait, what? So Samael is the same as Satan, the angel of death, and he planted the vine in paradise. Whereat Yahuwah Elohim was angry. So apparently, for whatever reason, we can all conjecture why at this point, but Elohim was angry that he planted this vine in there, and he cursed them in his plant. Which, while also on this account, he did not permit Adam to touch it, and therefore the devil, being envious, deceived him through his vine. Now, here's my guess. I think that this wasn't just your normal grapes. Like, you go out there and you eat any grape, it's like, this tastes good, but you're not drunk. It's like you can eat a whole, they're not fermented, obviously. I mean, you could eat a whole basket full of grapes. They're not fermented. They're just, you got a sweet tooth, whatever. They're really good. But then we see something interesting here that these grapes, they flourished in one day. So there's something about the quality of these grapes that are very different than your normal grapes. These, after all, do come from paradise. It is my belief from all the things I put together that when Satan planted it, it wasn't that he planted grapes. I think there was something about that he literally planted this to be the tree of knowledge of good and evil, right? That you can choose basically sin, like that you could follow your sinful desires by being drunken. You drink, you eat from these fruit, and you become drunk very quickly, and you follow the desires of your heart. That is kind of what I think is going on here. All right, so he did not permit Adam to touch it, and therefore the devil, being envious, deceived him through his vine. And the angel said to me, when Elohim made the garden and commanded Michael to gather 200,003 angels so that they could plant the garden. So that's interesting. So Michael is gathering 200,000 other angels, and they're all tilling this garden together. So we don't often think about that, that when Adam and Eve were in the garden, they didn't have to tend to it because, they would be, well, hey, there's Michael, there's Uriel, there's, so on and so forth. You just go down the list. They're seeing all these other angels. They're all tilling the ground. They're working it. And of course, Adam and Eve, or Hava's job was to be the high priest, right? They're not getting their fingers dirty down there in the dirt. They're doing their priestly business. Anyway, so they planted the garden. Michael planted the olive, and that's interesting in and of itself because Michael is the protector of Yasharel, and you see that the olive is identified with Yasharel. Gabriel planted the apple tree. So sorry that the tree of knowledge of good and evil is not an apple tree according to this account. Wrong tree. That the apple tree was framed. Uriel planted the nut. Raphael the melon, and Satanael or Satan the vine. For at first his name in former times was Satanael, and similarly all the angels planted the various trees. And again, I, Baruch, said to the angel, Adonai, show me the tree through which the serpent deceived Eve and Adam. And the angel said to me, listen, Baruch. In the first place, the tree was the vine. But secondly, the tree is sinful desire, which Satan spread over Hava and Adam. And because of this, Elohim has cursed the vine because Satanael had planted it. And by that, he deceived the Adam and Hava. All right. So let me skip a few lines ahead. Now, this is, it talks about, I mentioned, I think last week or the week before, about the 104,000 giants that were killed, which was really fascinating. And it says, and the water rose, the water rose above the highest mountains 20 cubits above the mountains. And Michael commented about that and how it basically went almost all the way up to the firmament, way up there. And the waters entered into the garden. Well, that's interesting. And we think about the garden like in physical terms, down on the ground, but it's almost like describing like a spiritual plane that it was in. And took all that was blooming, bringing out one shoot from the vine as Elohim withdrew the waters. So one shoot came out of the garden, like it kind of, the waters just came in, tipped in, it took out the shoot. This is what Noah finds. And there was dry land, and Noah went out from the ark and found the vine laying on the ground and did not recognize it, having only heard about it and its form. So, according to this, it sounds like there was no wine, there was no grapes in the ancient world before the flood. Now, that's what it appears like, and I'm trying to find if there were any texts that talk about that. So wine itself, fermented wine amongst humanity, according to this, could be a post-flood invention, and that's a discussion for another time and trying to find all those texts. But okay, so let me see here. Let me keep reading. Let's see, where am I? Okay. All right. So when Elohim caused the deluge upon earth, I'm still reading from Third Baruch, by the way, and destroyed all flesh and 409,000 giants. Um, and the water rose 15 cubits above the highest mountains. All right, hold on here. I'm rereading this again. Okay, but he Noah found also the shoot of the vine, and he took it and was reasoning in himself, what then is it? And I came and spake to him and the things concerning it. And he said, shall I plant it, or what shall I do? Since Adam was destroyed because of it, let me not also meet with the anger of Elohim because of it. And he's wise in this. He's like, look, I don't want to plant something from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. I mean, look what happened to Adam and Eve. I don't want to repeat that. He's got a brand new opportunity in a brand new world. Why destroy? And saying these things, he prayed that Elohim would reveal to him what he should do concerning it. And when he had completed the prayer, which lasted 40 days, well, that's interesting. He's praying, probably fasting for 40 days, biblical theme. And having besought many things and wept, he said, Adonai, I entreat thee to reveal to me what I shall do concerning this plant. But Elohim sent his angel, his name is Sarah Sail, and said to him, Arise, Noah, and plant the shoot of the vine, for thus says Yahuwah, its bitterness shall be changed into sweetness, and its curse shall become a blessing. And that which is produced from it shall become the blood of Elohim. And as though and as through it the human race obtained condemnation, so again through Yahushua Hamashiach, the Emmanuel, will they receive in him the upward calling and the entry into paradise. Know therefore, O Baruch, that as Adam through this very tree obtained condemnation and was divested of the glory of Elohim, so also the men who now drink insatiably the wine which is begotten of it transgress worse than Adam and are far from the glory of Elohim and are surrounding themselves or surrendering themselves to the eternal fire. For no good comes through it. For those who drink it, surfeit do these things. Neither does a brother pity his brother, nor father his son, nor children their parents. But from the drinking of wine comes all evil, such as murders, adulteries, fornications, perjuries, thefts, and such like. And nothing good is established by it. What it's basically saying is that if you thought the sin that Adam did through partaking of this was bad, look at all the people who drink wine nowadays and look at all the terrible things they do. They're saying that they have fallen even further from the glory of Elohim. That that, when they are handed over to the tree of knowledge of good and evil to their sinful desires, they it's yeah, do even worse acts. I mean, humanity is in a bad spot. All right. Now, but in quick review, according to the third Baruch, it actually lines up with the Aramaic Targum, and it shows you that Noah he didn't want to plant it, but he was instructed by Yahuwah to plant it and partake of it. And now I'm going to save that commentary for Michael to jump in first if he wants to, but we're going to see that there is an exact scene played out from the first time. It's repeated again when Adam and Eve were in front of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, and when Noah and his wife and his son were, there at the same fruit from the tree. But before we get there, before I hand it back to Michael, I'm going to read from one other interesting passage, and this comes from the Apocalypse of Abraham. I did a study with Zen Garcia about a couple months ago, and we went through this. We read this whole thing together, and but this tells the same story. And here's what it says: When Elohim caused the deluge upon earth and destroyed all flesh, and 409,000 giants. So that's interesting. All three texts they give a different number of giants. I didn't tell you guys. I read from the Greek and the Slavonic third Baruch, and they all give a different number. There was hundreds of thousands of, but they don't agree on the numbers, and that's you know probably just a translation thing and through the years. And the waters rose 15 cubits above the highest mountains. Then the water entered into paradise and destroyed every flower, but it removed wholly without the bounds the shoots of the vine and cast it outside. So this is the vine for the tree of knowledge. Again, cast it out. And when the earth appeared out of the water and Noah came out of the ark, he began to plant of the plants which he found, but he found also the shoot of the vine. And he took it and was reasoning in himself, what then is it? And I came and spake to him the things concerning it. So apparently, Abraham is talking to the same angel who was talking to Baruch. And he said, shall I plant it or what shall I do? Since Adam was destroyed because of it, let me not also meet with the anger of Elohim because of it. And saying these things, he prayed that Elohim would reveal to him what he should do concerning it. And when he had completed the prayer, which lasted 40 days, and having besought many things and wept, he said, hold on here. Hold on. I am reading from the Slavonic. That is so embarrassing. All right. I'm like, well, this story is way too familiar. Okay, let me try this one more time. Let's do a little reset. All right, we're in the Apocalypse of Abraham. All right, this is what it says. Now look again I must have done a copy and paste like twice or something like that. It happens from time to time. Now look again in this picture and see who it is who seduced Hava. And what is the fruit of the tree, and you will know what it is to be, and how it shall be with your seed among the people at the end of the days of the age. And all that you cannot understand, I will make known to you, for you are well pleasing in my sight, and I will tell you of these things which are kept in my heart. And I looked into the picture, and my eyes ran to the side of the Garden of Eden. And this, of course, Abraham looking into this picture. And I saw there a man of imposing height and mighty in stature. There's another reference to how big Adam was, a giant, incomparable in aspect, and he was embracing a woman who likewise approximated to the aspect of his size and nature. That's fascinating. I especially when we're looking to the millennial kingdom stuff and some of these buildings which were built for very large people. And I think that these were some of the resurrected saints, that there were some very large in stature, resurrected. And they were standing under a tree of the Garden of Eden, but the fruit of this tree was like a bunch of grapes of the vine. So there you go. And standing behind the tree was one who had the aspect of a serpent, having hands and feet like those of a man, and wings on his shoulders, six pair of wings, so that there were six wings on the right and six on the left. And as I continued looking, I saw the man and the woman eating the fruit from the tree. And I said, who are these who are embracing? And who is the one between them who is behind the tree? And what is the fruit that they're eating? And he said, this is the counsel of the world. This one is Adam, and this one who is their desire upon the earth is Eve or Hava. But he who is between them represents ungodliness and the beginnings on the way to perdition, even Azazel. Point is that also agrees that it was grapes. So just wanted to throw those out there. And when I get back, I'll talk about the scene that unfolds because of Noah eating the grapes and sending it back your way, Michael.
Awesome. So I have a lot of this part, and I think you want me to talk first on the curse and all that. So I will do that, and then I'll leave the what is it? The school of Shem for my last part, because that's pretty interesting. I have a decent amount on that. So number 20 is where I left off. So, and Noah began to be a husbandman, and he planted a vineyard. The word planted was used a few other times. Genesis 2:8, we already talked about that. Yehu Elohim planted a garden towards the east. So same thing. And then Genesis 21, Abraham planted a tamarisk tree at Beersheba, and there he called on the name of the Lord, the everlasting God. So I found this nice little summary on what happened there, and I'm just going to read a little bit of it. So just after the expulsion of Hagar and immediately before the binding of Isaac, Abraham encounters Abimelech, the king of Gerar, along with the chief of his troops, Phicol. So they do an exchange. Abraham rebukes the two for attempting to steal his well. As a means of securing possession of the well, Abraham gives the gift of sheep and oxen to Abimelech, and the two of them make a pact. Abraham tells Abimelech, you were to accept these 7 ewes from me as proof that I dug this well. The exact place is then named Beersheba, which means the two of them swore an oath. And then immediately after the pact, we are told that Abraham's Philistine friends, quote, returned their homeland, and then Abraham planted a tamarisk tree at Beersheba. Okay, so that was a little bit more context on why he did that. Now I'm going to talk more about the tamarisk tree. They're often referred to as salt cedars because they're a type of evergreen tree that produces a salt-like substance. And this is cool. Secondly, in the evenings, as the temperature gets cooler, these salt crystals form on the branches of these trees and absorb the moisture that is in the air, forming little droplets of water on the branches. And then when the sun rises in the morning and the heat begins to evaporate it, the water droplets burst, creating a fine mist, kind of like a natural form of air conditioning. So I thought that was kind of cool. This tree also produces a honey-like substance that is sweet to taste. This substance has been referred to as manna because of its similarities to the biblical manna that sustained the Israelites in the desert over 400 years after Abraham planted the tree. Amazingly, the tamarisk tree grows very slowly and can live several hundred years. And then this commentary said, why did he plant it? And so trees were often used as memorials, and is therefore appropriate that Abraham should honor the Most High by planting this tree. It'll be a permanent memorial between these two. Okay, so 21. I'm only going to talk about the difference. So, and he drank of the wine and was drunken, and he was uncovered within his tent. And look what the Palestinian says. And he found a wine which the river had brought away from the Garden of Eden, and he planted it in a vineyard, and it flourished in a day, and its grapes became ripe. And he pressed them out, and he drank of the wine, and was drunken, and he made himself naked in the midst of the tent. So these were from a river out of the Garden of Eden. Interesting. A vine found there. Powerful stuff. Okay, so 22. And Ham, the father of Canaan, saw the nakedness of his father and told his two brethren without. So I went down this huge rabbit hole. I didn't have time to finish the connection. There were so many passages that talked about this that I was trying to make a connection. I think I found something in 25 that would be my best guess, my dog in the race. But I want to read commentary on this. So it says, why would Noah curse his grandson Canaan for something that his son Ham did? So the answer lies in the phrase that Ham saw the nakedness of his father. So at first, our modern reading, we assume that saying has a plain meaning. Ham saw his dad naked. But there was evidence from Scripture to suggest that this is not what was meant at all. So consider these passages, also written by the same author, Moses. So Leviticus 18 says, you shall not uncover the nakedness of your father, which is the nakedness of your mother. She is your mother, you shall not uncover her nakedness. You shall not uncover the nakedness of your father's wife, it is your father's nakedness. And Leviticus 20, if a man lies with his father's wife, he has uncovered his father's nakedness. Both of them shall surely be put to death. Leviticus 20:11. So notice the usage of uncover the nakedness of your father, which is the nakedness of your mother. So Moses uses the idiom, then he explains it right away, so the meaning is not lost. So in both cases, Moses, the author of both books, was using an idiom to basically don't have relations with your mother, or don't have relations with your father's wife. So being that the passages in Genesis were written by the same author, it may be said that in Genesis 9, Moses was using this idiom to say that Ham had relations with his mother, or Noah's wife. Either way, yeah, so interesting. These idioms are never used in Scripture to describe a homosexual relationship. So where do people get that? Is that the rabbinic teaching? At least based on this commentary. But I thought it was really interesting, and I have some more on that on 25. But okay, so 23 says, and Shem and Japheth took a garment and laid it upon both their shoulders and went backward and covered the nakedness of their father. And continues. So that word covered was used a few times, and an interesting parallel. So Exodus 14, Moses reached out with his hand over the sea, and the sea returned to its normal state at daybreak. While the Egyptians were fleeing right into it, Yahuwah overthrew the Egyptians in the midst of the sea. The waters returned and covered the chariots and the horsemen. So it's like a protection, a covering. Pharaoh's entire army had gone into the sea after them. Not even one of them remained, because the waters covered their chariots, just like these two sons covering their father. 2 Chronicles 5, King Solomon and all the congregation of Israel were assembled with him before the ark, were sacrificing so many sheep and oxen that they could not be counted or numbered. Then the priest brought the ark of the covenant of the Lord to its place, into the inner sanctuary of the house, to the Holy of Holies, under the wings of the cherubim. Now here it is. For the cherubim spread their wings over the place of the ark, so that the cherubim made a covering over the ark and its poles. So these angels are spreading their wings as a covering over the ark for protection. Same word. As the waters returned and covered the chariots and covered the nakedness. And then finally, Psalms 106:9. He rebuked the Red Sea and it dried up. He led them through the depths as through a desert. He saved them from the hand of the adversary. He redeemed them from the hand of the enemy. Water covered their foes. So water, if you follow along, you know my belief that water is the power of Yah, and it can do great things. It protects his people. Okay, 24. All I'm doing is reading the difference because the Palestinian goes way more detailed. So I'm not going to read the KJV, but on number 24 it says, and Noach awoke from his wine and knew by the relation of a dream what had been done to him by Ham his son, who was inferior in worth on the account that he had not begotten a fourth son. I think that gives it away, and 25 is what I'm going to show here. So, and again, Stephanie pointed this one out. So this was another good take on her. So 25 says, and he said, cursed be Canaan, a servant of servants shall he be unto his brethren. So a little etymology before I get into it. The possible etymology of Canaan could mean lowlands. So to be low, humble, depressed. and also refers to the color purple, so that Canaan and Phoenicia would be synonymous with the land of purple. I thought that was cool. Okay, so if reading 24 and 25 in the Palestinian, and Noach awoke from his wine and knew by the relation of a dream what had been done to Ham his son, who was inferior in worth on the account that he had not begotten a fourth son. And he said, accursed is Canaan, who is his fourth son. A serving servant shall be to his brethren. So Canaan is Noah's fourth son. What does that mean? Is it basically his stepson? Did Ham have relations with his mother and produced a son? I don't know. And I'm totally forgetting what Stephanie said. I hope she puts it in the comments because she added way more, or at least speaks up afterwards. Please do that. Okay, so what does Book of Jubilees talk about with this? So Jubilees 10. And Canaan saw the land of Lebanon to the river of Egypt, that it was very good, and he went not into the land of his inheritance to the west. So he was given land and did not go. And he dwelt in the land of Lebanon, eastward and westward from the border of Jordan, and from the border of the sea. And Ham, his father, and Cush, and Mitzrayim, his brother, said to him, Thou, and this is interesting, thou hast settled in a land which is not thine, and which did not fall to us by lot. So it appears these Canaanites have settled in land that was not their own. Does that sound familiar? What do you guys make of that? I'll throw that out there, but I thought Jubilees made an interesting case there. Okay, finally, the curse of Ham. So what is it? So some other takes on this story. So the Targum Onkelos has Ham gossiping about his father's drunken disgrace in the street, in quotes, so that being held up to public mockery was what had angered Noah. And as the Cave of Treasure puts it, Ham laughed at his father's shame and did not cover it, but laughed about it and mocked it. So and this was cool, I thought. Actually, no, not this one yet. But Noah, in verse 25, Noah refers to Shem and Japheth as the brethren of Canaan, whereas in verse 18 they're identified as his uncles. And the Table of Nations presents Canaan and Mitzrayim, Egypt, among the sons of Ham. And in Psalms, Egypt is equated with Ham. Okay, so it is noteworthy that the curse was made by Noah, not by Yah. So some scholars claim that when a curse is made by a man, it can only have been effective if Yah supports it. Unlike the curse of Ham and his descendants, which was not confirmed by Yah, or at least it is not mentioned in the Bible. What do you guys think about that? Okay, so this is the Dead Sea Scrolls, 4Q252 states that since Ham had already been blessed, and this is interesting, this is what I was talking about, since he has already been blessed by Yah in Genesis 1, and God blessed Noah and his sons, and said unto them, Be fruitful and multiply and replenish the earth, he could not now be cursed by Noah. He couldn't go back on that. So that's their explanation on why the son was cursed instead of Ham. I thought that was pretty interesting. I never noticed that. Josephus argued that Noah refrained from cursing Ham because of his nearest of kin, and so cursed Ham's son instead. Book of Jubilee. Okay, I already read that one. Earmuffs for this one. People with children, earmuffs, please, if you want to. Yeah, earmuffs. So, rabbinic. They claim that this curse was castration. I'm not going to read that much, or abuse. I'm not going to give their point for the castration, but the abuse I thought was interesting. So the argument for abuse from the text draws an analogy between and he saw. So that was written in two places in the Bible. So with regard to Ham and Noah, and Ham, the father came and saw the nakedness of his father. And also in Genesis 34:2, it was written, and when Shechem, the sons of Hamor, saw her, Dinah, he took her and lay with her and defiled her. So this is where they're getting the abuse part, if you can read between the lines of what I'm saying. Again, rabbinic, trying to give you every interpretation that I've found on these. And I hope Stephanie put it in the notes. But that's all I got for now. I have a lot on the School of Shem, but I'll let No go first.
Well, as you can see, I mean, I'm not going to go through all that again, but as you guys can see, it very clearly says that Noah. Let me pull up the actual verse here. And now I just lost it. But okay, verse 24, verse 25, he's cursing Canaan, who is his fourth son. So think about that. Noah only has three sons. Now he has a fourth son. Now, think about some of the implications about this. Well, before we do, let's just put this in another way. Let's say that even though Michael pointed out that Moses is using a very specific language of seeing your father's nakedness and what this implies. Where are some of the passages that talk about that? I had them written down here. I'll find them. Oh, yeah, there's quite a few in Leviticus chapter 8, verses 6-20, goes on and on and on. I'm not going to read it all because it's relentless. You can read chapter 8, it goes on and on about the nakedness of so and so and how it's all related to sexual relations. The most obvious one is Leviticus 18:8, and it says, "Thou shalt not uncover the nakedness of thy father's wife. It is thy father's nakedness." All right. So within this language, or as Michael said, idiom, the nakedness of your father, uncovering it, is to uncover his woman, his wife. Now, I, for one, do not think that Noah's wife was Ham's mother. And you might be like, what? How is that possible? The birds and the bees and all that. Well, this is where the writings of Abraham just is so phenomenal. And it's like, you know, the glove fits. And it talks about how Noah, before the flood, he actually had two different wives, and one of them was Naima, who is talked about. We went through that in the lineage. It was she was a daughter of Cain, and she he was instructed to take her as a wife, and she gave forth Ham. I've made the case in the past that because when you're looking at the book of Jasher, Jubilees, Genesis, writings of Abraham, all these different texts, none of them agree on the birth order, whether it was Ham, Japheth, or Shem that was born first. They're all different orders. None of them seem to agree. That's always a head scratcher. But I've made a case in other parts of Scripture where the idea is put forth, like think of Ishmael through Tamar. The idea was that Sarah was going to raise uh, him as her own child. And so she would have been accredited in the genealogy as, Abraham and Sarah, and Ishmael. And of course, it didn't turn out that way. And they had to kick Hagar and Ishmael out of the camp. So the idea is that even though Noah's wife is accredited with having these three children, it's a son that was taken under her wing, under her umbrella. But Ham was a child of Cain. You're seeing the seed of Satan continue. But it's a very interesting scene. It's the same thing played out. Noah gets drunk. Um, Noah Ham goes in. Let me back up here. So let me just say, like, if my twin sons were to they were to see me in my bedroom, they were seeing me naked. And we're not even talking about the Aramaic Targum at this point. We're just going with the Masoretic. It would be a very odd thing for me. My son is out there snickering about it. He snickers to his other brother, but I saw my dad's private part. It would if I went out there and I'm like, "Cursed be you and cursed be your son and all of your descendants." Like, that would be like, "Whoa," like, let's reel it back several notches here. I mean, that's pretty intense for something like that. He sees Noah naked in his tents, and, maybe Noah's doing something naughty, whatever, but it's like, "Well, what were you even doing in his tent," right? So, however, if one of my sons were to, uh, go with take my woman as their own and rape her and have a child, that's a whole nother scenario where I've got a baby now, and I'm like, ooh, this is my son and it's my grandson at the same time. You guys see what I'm talking about here. All right. But so here's what I think was happening. When Ham goes and talks to his two brothers, what he was really doing was he was saying, I'm in charge now. I'm in control. Your mother? I just raped her. She's my woman now. I'm in control. I'm taking over the ship. I'm course correcting everything. As we know, Ham went and stole the garments that was Adam and Eve's, which finally ends up in Nimrod's hand. And he's a bad dude, right? And as Michael pointed out, what did the sons of Canaan do? They go take over land that wasn't theirs. They were the entire seed of Satan is always trying in any way possible to destroy the messianic line, to destroy the inheritance. They want it for themselves. And it's something we also see with the Edomites later down the line. All right. Let me see if I can find some other passages here that talk about this. Oh, here's another really interesting thing, too, that part of the frustration here is that all indications that I can find is that Noah would have never been able to have relations with his wife ever again. I mean, think about how much this sucks. I All the women were destroyed before the flood. He picked his wife. They go on the ark together. They're going to repopulate the earth. Noah and his wife could have still had more children. He lived for another few hundred years or so. But right afterwards, it goes bad in that after Ham defiled his wife, his woman, the he might have it again, but there's good indications he didn't. Here's why. Let's read from Jubilees chapter 33. And this is the account, with, Reuben and Yaakov, all right? Reuben commits the sin of Ham all over again. And Reuben saw Bilhah, Rachel's maid. Now, keep in mind, Yaakov, the children of Israel have 4 mommies, all right? So when we get into the whole, how polygyny debate and how that was never Yah's plan, well, he chose Israel to have 4 mommies. Just throw that out there. And Reuben saw Bilhah, Rachel's maid, the concubine of his father, bathing in water in a secret place. So what was he doing in a secret place to go check her out? And he loved her. Uh-oh. And he hid himself at night, and he entered the house of Bilhah at night, and he found her sleeping alone on a bed in her house. And he lay with her. Basically, he raped her. And she awoke and saw, and behold, Reuben was lying with her in the bed. So she didn't even apparently wake up until the deed was done. And as she uncovered the border of her covering and seized him, she cried out, which is what you're supposed to do in Torah. It's too bad he did the deed first, but she cried out as soon as she found out and discovered that it was Reuben. And she was ashamed because of him and released her hand from him, and he fled. And she lamented because of this thing exceedingly and did not tell it to anyone. And when Yaakov returned and sought her, she said unto him, I am not clean for thee, for I have been defiled as regards thee. For Reuben has defiled me and has lain with me in the night. And I was asleep and did not discover until he uncovered my skirt and slept with me. And Yaakov was exceedingly wroth with Reuben because he had lain with Bilhah, because he had uncovered his father's skirt. So there again, you see, he uncovered his father's skirt. And Yaakov did not approach her again. So there you have it, because Reuben had defiled her. And as for any man who uncovers his father's skirt, his deed is wicked exceedingly, for he is abominable before Yahuwah. For this reason, it is written and ordained on the heavenly tablets that a man should not lie with his father's wife, and should not uncover his father's skirt, for this is unclean. They shall surely die together, the man who lies with his father's wife, and the woman also, for they have wrought uncleanness on the earth. And there shall be nothing unclean before our Elohim and the nation which he has chosen for himself in a possession. And again it is written a second time, Cursed be he who lies with the wife of his father. For he that uncovereth his father's shame, and all the holy ones of Yahuwah said, so be it, so be it. So again, with this, Reuben is not actually sleeping with his mother. It's he's coveting a woman that is not his, that belongs to his father. And here we see once again a confirmation of this. This one comes from the Testament of Reuben, which was part of the 12 patriarchs. And it says this, and now this is Reuben talking to his sons. And now, my children, love the truth, and it will preserve you. Hear ye the words of Reuben your father. Pay no heed to the face of a woman, nor associate with another man's wife, nor meddle with affairs of womankind. Uh, After this unfortunate episode, apparently it's almost like an alcoholic who they can't even deal with alcohol anymore. Once it's like he can't even deal with women anymore. He apparently had a lot of lust in his heart. It was easy for him just to step away from the game. For had I not seen Bilhah bathing in a covered place, I had not fallen into this great iniquity. For my mind, taking in the thought of the woman's nakedness, suffered me not to sleep until I had wrought the abominable thing. Now, we had discussed in the past about what lusting is. This is clearly lusting. Okay. It's not finding a woman attractive. It is not, is not. it's not even thinking like, "Wow, I'd like to, procreate with her," love her, or whatever. It's like, this is what lust is. It's like you change this woman into an object of your lust where you just, wanna have your way with her, and it just dominates your thinking. Like, that is what I think Yahusha is talking about, not finding a woman attractive or beautiful. Okay, so he didn't sleep that night. Okay, and for a while, Yaakov, our father, had gone to Yitzchak, his father, when we were in Eder, near to Bethlehem. Bilhah became drunk and was asleep. So this is interesting. So this says here that Bilhah was drunk. This explains why she didn't know until after the deed. Same thing happened with Noah. He was drunk. He didn't know. Bilhah became drunk and was asleep uncovered in her chamber. Having therefore gone in and beheld her nakedness, I wrought the impiety without her perceiving it. And leaving her sleeping, I departed. And forthwith the angel of Elohim revealed to my father concerning my impiety. And he came and mourned over me. And here's the key right here. And he touched her no more. So that's too bad. And let's see. I think that's all I have on that. Back to you, Michael.
Alrighty, I'll finish my part up. I just have some on the school of Shem. So that is number 27. So, and I know Mary was talking about that earlier, and just coincidence, we're going to talk about it. So, Yahuwah shall enlarge Japheth, and he shall dwell in tents of Shem. Canaan shall be a servant. So, before we get to the school of Shem, I'm going to talk about in the tents. In the tents. So, the word study, last one of the night. Psalm 78 says, He leveled a path for his anger. He did not spare their souls from death, but turned their lives over to the plague, and struck all the firstborn in Egypt, the first and best of their vigor, in the tents of Ham. Kind of fits there, in the tents. Psalms 84, for a day in your courtyards, this is a popular one, is better than 1,000 elsewhere. I would rather stand at the threshold of the house of my God than live in the tents of the wickedness. Another negative tent there. Psalms 118, the Lord is my strength and song, and he has become my salvation. The sound of joyful shouting and salvation is in the tents of the righteous. The right hand of the Lord performs valiantly. So, just a few examples of being in the tents of somebody. And again, just it's tents of the righteousness or tents of the wickedness. Choose the path. Okay, Palestinian. Yahuwah shall beautify the borders of Japheth, and his sons shall be proselytized and dwell in the schools of Shem. And Canaan shall be a servant to them. So in the KJV, it's in the tents of Shem. In the Palestinians, and those who dwell in the schools of Shem. So I looked and found a decent amount, and it looks like some of them are repetitive, and I didn't do my due diligence, but I'll read some. So, according to tradition, Rebecca feared she might miscarry and decided to go to the school of Shem to inquire. There she was told that two nations were in her womb, and two people from within shall be divided. So that's one time. I found Mount Moriah, also called School of Shem. Mount Moriah. What do you guys think about that? So there's another story that after the Akedah, or the binding of Isaac, he went off to the school of Shem and Eber. I thought that was pretty cool. So that's where Isaac went after after he was let go. Yaakov enters the school of Shem and Eber to absorb the Torah value system that will allow him to survive Laban and to fall spiritually and become Laban in the form of Yaakov. So Jacob went to the school of Shem as well. The book of Jasher says that after Shem died, Jacob returned home from the school of Shem and Eber, where he had spent many years of his life. And this looks similar to the first one, but I'll share it again. And Isaac was 40 years old when he took his wife, Rebekah, the daughter of Bethuel, an Aramean from Padan, the sister of Laban the Aramean. And Isaac prayed before Yahuwah concerning Rebekah, his wife, because she was barren. And Yahuwah answered him, and Rebekah and his wife conceived. And the children pushed one another in her womb. She said, if such is the tribulation of children, why now do I have children? And she went to the school of Shem the Great to beseech mercy from before the Lord. And the Lord said to her, two people are in your womb. So that's what I found in the School of Shem. Just some additional context. Rebecca and Mount Moriah and Isaac. Um, I'm losing my voice, and that's all I got for tonight. I'll hand off to Noel.
Yeah, in the coming weeks in the Genesis Targum, we'll definitely go more into the School of Shem. They it has some stuff to say on it, and we'll cover those in the future. With that, hand it over to you guys as well. It looks like there were, definitely some things you might want to talk about. We covered a lot of subjects tonight, so this is hopefully you guys took notes. Handing it over to you guys. The defense rests. Did anyone have anything on the in Genesis on the eating of animals? Did there's always, of course, conversation, heated conversation to be had about anything that has to do with polygyny of the multiple wives and the mess that we see in those situations with Reuben and Bilhah and so on and so forth.
Something something I didn't notice before, Noel, was that the other two brothers, for some reason, I even though I remembered that there was like that, the whole uncovering the nakedness of your father had to do with having sex with your mother, it didn't clue into me until just now that the other brothers literally went in and they covered their mother, which is kind of interesting that they didn't they may have covered Noah at the same time, but they covered her without even looking, and they like turned their faces away so that they couldn't see anything. So that there seems to be like another element of like not just not having sex with her, but not even like looking and like observing that thing, which I thought was, I don't know, interesting, but it wasn't like touched on in like a specific sense. But I think there's something interesting there. It's just like it's avoiding anything at all.
Right. And I could show you guys paintings and art and so on of this famous scene of covering their father's nakedness, and Shem and Japheth, they're walking in backwards with the sheet. They're trying not to look, and Noah's laying there naked and trying to cover him. And it doesn't, if you were actually to show in a picture of them covering their mother, people would be like, what? I mean, it would just, it's one of those things like, why is this so not talked about? Is this really that hidden? Is it because seminary students and others, they really haven't read through the Torah, and they know what the father's nakedness is? I'm amazed that we can have this discussion today and people don't know. They were never told this. And so there's something clearly being hidden. Um, and that being said, when it comes to father's nakedness, like if this were purely just Shem seeing his dad naked, I find that hard to believe. I mean, you go to the Middle East today, and dudes, they swim together naked. It's kind of just a fact. Like there's a reason men and women, they don't bathe together. Women, they have their, you go to like there was a, I went to the Sea of Galilee, and Galilee is beautiful, by the way. If you were to spend anywhere within Israel, Galilee is just a stunningly beautiful place. And I was surprised. I went there, and the some rabbinical dudes, they started undressing, and they were there with their sons, and they stripped down, and they went in the water, and there was a beach where no women were allowed. And I'm like, huh, okay. So if you're not supposed to see your dad naked, that was some serious issues right there. And obviously they didn't read it that way. They were proficient in the Torah, and they're like, no, a son can see his dad naked. It's that's it's not sexual, right? So
It's just like from the movie I watched recently, Captain Fantastic or something. The guy's just standing in the doorway of the bus, and he's just completely naked. And some guy walks by, looks at him funny, and he's like, "It's just a penis." It's like nudity is not the problem, right? And from what you were saying, it seems like Shem and Japheth, that was their actual mother, not their and for Ham it was his half mother, or like his surrogate mother, his like stepmother. So
Right now, if it was his real mother, that just makes it all the more sick and twisted, right? So, I mean, if we don't, the only account I have ever seen that says that Ham came from a different mother was the writings of Abraham. In my opinion, though, that makes tons of sense. Um, and so you guys think about in a lot of households, and this is why sexual abuse happens in a lot of uh, this might be personal topic for people, so I apologize if I'm trudging on anything very private, but in a lot of mixed households, it seems that a lot of the times, like a father will come in and those aren't his daughters, it was from a former marriage. And that's where a lot of abuse situations happen, where uncles or, it's other people that aren't related, they come in and they do some terrible things. And so to me, it makes kind of a lot of sense that Ham would have done that if she wasn't his mother. It just makes more sense to me, in his eyes. It's the same situation of the first thing you see when Absalom comes in and takes over David's throne. The first thing he doesn't sleep with his own mother. He goes and sleeps with all of David's concubines. And in fact, it said afterwards that David never slept with them again. And so that's something you would do to overturn a throne. Unfortunately, in these situations, the queens, the concubine stuff, they were the most in danger because they were, the new guy shows up and he sits on the throne and overturns the old husband, the king. He goes and he sleeps with the women to claim his dominance. And so that seems to be what's happening here. You literally see like Satan. I mean, it had to be a very demonic scene, and you see. I've never read anything where it said straight up like Satan embodied him or anything like that, but there seems to be an implication there that Satan is trying to overturn the throne. He's getting his revenge for Yahuwah destroying the whole earth and all of Satan's work. So the line was posed: maybe Ham seduced her and not rape. I mean, that's a possibility, but it seems like if we're looking at Reuben and Bilhah, and Noah is drunk, so what is she doing in the tent while he's drunk, right? Like she appears to be, maybe it's a separate tent. Maybe they're in two different tents. I don't know. Um, but it just seems to me like it was probably more like a rape situation.
Yeah,
Like
the
he
only
like
reason.
well,
Oh,
let me
go
just
ahead.
say, I was going to say that Noah never turned it on his wife. Like he never, like with Adam and Eve, Yahuwah, he judges Eve and he judges Adam. Eve was responsible. You never see, like with the case of Bilhah or Noah's wife, neither one of them come across as responsible to me. Now, we're not given any indication that Noah's wife screamed like Bilhah did, but it does say that Noah perceived what happened. So I don't know. Take that for what it is. Go ahead.
Yeah, that was my point. That there was nothing mentioned about her screaming or crying out or fighting him off or anything like that. And as closely as people lived to each other during those times, because they were a very close knit community, you would think if she had cried out and had fought, that someone would have heard and come running. That's the only reason I brought it up.
So Marianne points out that the schoolship has been on my mind a lot lately. I homeschool my two kids, and that's my goal, to try to mimic what it should have been like and teach what was taught. It's my aspiration. Well, let me just point out that here at the Unexpected Cosmology, we are accepting the essays of students who want to write about like truther material, Torah based or anything like that. And I am publishing them, and they can be anonymous. So if you want to ascribe to the School of Shem, be sure to send in your child's paperwork. No, but all that said, that I'm being serious about that. That I call it Truther School, and all the homeschool parents out there. if you want them to like write, something that's, really, true to their base, they could be any age, be 5 years old, they could be 12, 15, whatever. I do publish them and we could be anonymous. You don't have to know who it is or whatever. But the School of Shem, we'll get more into in the upcoming weeks. Um, my belief is that now during the specific no, and my belief is that the School of Shem, he was Melchizedek by that point. All right. And he was no longer mortal. I put the pregnant pause there on purpose. I should have probably kept it a little bit longer. I actually think that by the time you get to Abraham, by the time you get to Yitzhak and Yaakov, all three of them went to the School of Shem, and we'll get there. I believe that Shem was no longer immortal, that he was an immortal, that he was a type of Enoch type of creature on the earth, that there was some sort of portal that was on Mount Zion that connected to paradise. And so when it said that Yaakov and Yitzhak went to the School of Shem, what it's actually saying is that they weren't physically on the earth. And again, the Targum, we'll talk about that. And what's interesting is that, so I'll go ahead and bring this up now. There are, when we look at the two timelines, I've told you before that I believe that the LXX is the more accurate timeline. Okay, the 7,000-year timeline deception, as I call it. The LXX spreads things out radically longer, and it course corrects some things, but there's only 3 problems I have ever encountered. If the LXX is correct and not the Masoretic timeline, then uh, 3 characters are way too old. One is Shem, the other is Nimrod, and the other is King Og. King Og had to be ancient. Like we talk about, no one lives over 1,000 years. He would have had to live like 16 or 1,700 years. I mean, really, really old. And so I've really worked on these issues, and but I think that the easiest one to solve, and the Targum straight out says that Og lived a long time. That Yahuwah purposely had him live a long. He would have been a god on this earth. I mean, that guy would have been like revered by everybody. Og. But I think that at some point Shem did die, and I actually wonder. This is maybe a little bit more out there for some of you. I kind of wonder if there were multiple Nimrods. That's a whole different discussion. But even historically, when we look at the different people who are supposedly Nimrod, one was Gilgamesh. That there may have been multiple Nimrods. In fact, the um, the Nazarene Acts of the Apostles mentions Nimrod the First. It was Nimrod the First that introduced fire. And it's like, well, what do you mean Nimrod the First? Was it like Nimrod the Second and the Third? But anyways, going back to that, yeah, we'll get there. And we don't know at what point Shem died or ascended. But yeah, and oh yeah, that's what I was going to parallel. Is that at the same time you have the School of Shem on Mount Zion, you have Nimrod building the Tower of Babel. Okay, they were contemporaries of each other. And so the question is being poised. If Shem is hanging out on Mount Zion, he's got an entryway to paradise, to heaven. He is teaching the Torah, the way. But if Nimrod really wanted to go to heaven, why not just go to Shem? He knew who Shem was. Why not just go? According to the Epic of Gilgamesh, Gilgamesh, who many think is Nimrod, he goes to the mountain where Noah lives, which would have been Mount Zion, and he talks to him and he interviews him. So we know that they talked. And that just goes back to the fact that it- Nimrod didn't want to go to heaven by Yahuwah's instructions of righteousness. He wanted to take the back door. He wanted to go by his own terms, and he wanted to break through. And that shows his true wickedness. He had the full access. He could have just done it. Same thing with Esau. Esau, he never went to the School of Shem. And Esau is the guy. Keep in mind, we'll get to it. I talked about it a few weeks ago, that he is contrasted with Cain, where Esau tells Yaakov, there is no heaven, there is no afterlife, there is no Elohim. Like he just throws it out there. He didn't believe. He was almost like an atheist, like Cain, and he never went to the School of Shem. So that's my rant, but we'll talk more about that in the weeks to come.
Oh, what do you think of what I put in the chat, that the School of Shem could be the camp? Like, because Yeshua is the Melchizedek priest, and he's training other priests. We're supposed to be priests in the kingdom, learning righteousness, Torah be on our heart. I've done a word study on that city, and people assume it's the New Jerusalem that are, that believe it comes out at the beginning. I can't prove it. And so, what if that's the school of Shem? I don't know. What do you think about that?
You mean the New Jerusalem is a solution?
No, the camp before the New Jerusalem comes
Yeah.
down in Revelation 20, and since he's the Melchizedek priesthood and he's training priests, we're all priests in the kingdom. We'll judge the other 12 tribes. What if that's the school of Shem? I don't know. Just a thought.
Yeah, that's I don't have a problem with that. University of Melchizedek, yeah. You so Josh said he said maybe we are the giants and the chickens are the ancient dinosaurs. As soon as he said that, I thought of that Keanu Reeves meme, where he's always thinking like, what if, I like if you have Keanu Reeves saying that, that would be pretty funny. Maybe I'll make that into a meme before the night's over. Did anyone have anything on Romans that they wanted to bring up?
So you talked about earlier about the fathers, the children not seeing their father's nakedness, and is it your belief then that that it's okay?
Uh, well, someone would have to, I guess, show a passage in Scripture where, because Moses specifies, he's like, "You are not to see your father's, the your father's nakedness," and then it says, "And this is, your father's wife. You're not to see her nakedness." Um, so I have not been presented with a case that would show that it is a sin if I were to see my dad naked. Like, no. Like, if he were to go swimming in a river and take it off and I were to go swimming with him, um, that's a little bit outside of my culture. If I feel a little uncomfortable even saying that because I've never seen my dad naked. So, but I don't know. I don't think that that would be sin. I don't think that would be grounds of transgressing the Torah to do that. Even brothers, if they were to go swimming naked or whatever, get in the shower and bathe together. I mean, the assumption here is that it's not sexual. It's not perverse. You're in this case, you're it's kind of like, okay, the wife is your father's, right? It's his wife. You will not lust after another man's his ox, his wife, his house, his all these kind of things. But you are kind of a part of your father, I guess. You're in his household. And another example of this would be like in the Middle East, to this day, uh, even really before the 1800s, like pre-mud flood, guys, a woman's hair was exclusively reserved for her husband. Now you can debate whether that's Torah or not, but a woman would not let her hair down in the presence of anyone who was not her husband or her children. Um, and it would be a very sexual thing to do in a lot of cultures. And so, if you are in the household, is it a sin for the children to see their mother's hair? No, it's not. Like, not in that context. You see what I'm saying? Like, there are things that when you're in a household that you can kind of air it out a little bit better. Another good
Well,
example of that. Go
I
ahead.
mean, I just want to say that's a little different from someone's nakedness, I would say.
But
You know,
here's the
see,
thing: nakedness can be seen unintentionally. Like you could wander around. You could like think that no one's in the bathroom, walk into the bathroom, see somebody naked. You could, someone could be changing. You could open the door by mistake, see somebody naked. Whereas like the difference is that it's involuntary or it's voluntary. And it seems like this was
right?
a very voluntary act, and he was even boasting about it. He wasn't like, "Oh, hey, I saw your mom naked." It's like, guys, check this out. Like, I really did this thing, and he's like boasting about it. So it's not just like a, oh, I just happened to walk around the corner and there was your mom showering. Um, it seems a lot more like an active thing, and that's like there's not a lot of, I don't, correct me if I'm wrong, no, but I don't think there's a lot of Torah that involves like just by mistakenly stumbling upon something. It's really willful actions that's against the law.
Yeah, I think it goes even beyond voluntary or involuntary and goes to intentional.
Yeah, and again, though, I would have to see scripture passages of like now when you get into the book of Maccabees, that's kind of interesting because one of the things that was considered a when the Greeks came in and they made Jerusalem their base, they Hellenized it. One of the complaints in the book of Maccabees is that they put the gyms in the gymnasiums in Jerusalem, and that was like an abomination. But you have to realize that the Greeks, they would perform their athletics naked, and it was a very public act. That you're doing the trampoline or just whatever the bars, whatever. You're naked and you're running on the track. I don't even know how that's comfortable for any guy, but you're naked. And so that would have been a breaking of the Torah. We're not talking about a public display of nakedness. We're talking about just living life type of things, type of nakedness. A good example might be bathrooms back then. Nowadays, you go into a bathroom, you have probably a private stall, like you're going to sit down, and that's not likely. Some cultures still are open. You go to some cultures around the world, and they don't have stalls. You sit down, you squat, and a guy comes and squats right next to you. I don't think that that is what is seeing somebody's nakedness in this case, right? It's in all the cases that I can see in Leviticus, it's all sexual, right? So if there was a very perverse boy who wanted to sexually see his father naked and he's going and checking him out, that's obviously crossing some boundaries. That is now perverse. He in his heart he wants to, lay with another man. That would take it to the breaking the spiritual Torah in that sense. But no, I don't think that within a family household. I mean, think about this, Andrew. Like right now, I have a daughter who was breastfeeding. Right now, before that, I had two sons. They stopped when they were two, but there wasn't a sin for them to see their mother's breasts, right? To to feed off of it. So um, that's just yeah. I think it's all intense. I think it's now it's very different if I went to somebody else's house and um I don't know. I don't know. I don't know if I'm a guest at someone's house how that works. Yeah, but as Josh says, intent that leads to action. Yeah.
Well, if
It's
we
not
take
your
if
mother or father, so
Well, okay. Let me give you another example. Here in the city of Charleston, when I gave a tour here and showed it to be a pre mud flood city, and one of the characteristics of Charleston is that there's uh there's these side porches. There's actually two front doors. There's the front door on the street level that leads to the breezeway, and then there's another front door. And in the history of Charleston, if that front door is open on the street, they're saying you're welcome to come in to the balcony area, and that we're not lounging around naked or in our undies. If it's closed, the family is I just think that in older times, families were much more like we're much more weird about it here in the West. Let's put it that way. You go to these other cultures in the East and stuff like that, like when you're in the privacy of the home, they kind of let it out a little bit more. But it's because they're all, family and that kind of stuff. I don't know if I'm making a point to everyone, but there's just things that you would see in the privacy of a home if you were family that you would never see elsewhere in elsewhere. Like nowadays, men and women, they just strut their stuff, and, bikinis everywhere and that kind of stuff, it's that the West is, and then we become very weird about this kind of stuff, and it's just not like that in other cultures where they're very reserved in public, and then in private they kind of let it out. All right. Yeah. Someone said next topic, please. Yeah, we could talk about something else. Does anyone have any other thoughts?
I mean,
But
I
again,
think.
if somebody
Oh,
but if someone wants to make a case that, you are a man is not to see another man naked, I don't see that. It's like, well, then we can't have
Y-
doctors, we can't have
Well, not another man, but your father or,
Yeah, but I think
your
that's
mother.
ridiculous. I think you're splitting hairs. I mean, it's a shame that they didn't do a better interpretation of this because, I mean, to me, it's obvious. You just don't see your father's wife, period. Whether she is your mother or not makes no difference. It's your father's wife. She belongs to him, and you're not supposed to see her naked or definitely not have any sexual relations with her. It was premeditated on the part of Ham because it's very clear that he basically bragged about it. So I just don't see what the debate is. It seems very, very clear to me, and that's why I said, please, next topic. I mean, it's
Not
clear.
specifically about Ham. I'm talking about Torah in general.
Well, it's the same
That we're
thing.
not
I mean,
supposed to see the nakedness of our
yeah,
father or mother.
it relates. I mean, it relates to that. It's simple.
well, so one of the things when we talk about commands in Torah, okay, it's like today in Deuteronomy in our Torah portions, we're reading about what idolatry is. And so another great example would be like the cutting the sides of your beard. And so when we come into the Torah communities, uh, we get we get two camps of people. All right, we're like the one camp is like you don't ever take scissors to your beard; it grows. You don't ever touch it. And then you get the others are like, no. If you look at the context, it's talking about cutting it for the dead or different things like that. Or worshiping these gods. And so I another great one is, idolatry, idols, obviously, and so it's put forward well, it says, "Don't have any, carved image of anything in the heavens or below," and it's like, well, I mean, should we not have these are good questions to ask, by the way. Are GI Joes for our sons? Is that idolatry? Right? There's the the thing that comes up often is the carved owl that was in my house that has been kind of a laughing stock in this group. But is that an idol? These kind of things. And then so some people will say anything that is carved, any kind of image, you can't have it at all whatsoever. Better not be in the house. And then some people go so far as to say you can't have artwork or anything like that, right? But then the other camp will say, well, if you actually look at the context, because Israel did have carved images, including the temple, they were to make angels and the seraphim. It's it's about worship. You are not to make any image to worship it as your God. And so when we look at all these things, we have to understand like um, what is Moses actually saying here, right? So he could be saying that you are not to see the actual nakedness of your father. But then he does explain it and say, which is your mother. So to me, it's just context, 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 and everybody's got to follow their own consciousness, their own, um, yeah, their own conscious on this. And I can't be the one to tell you what you should or shouldn't do on this. Everyone needs to read the Bible for themselves and come up with the right solution. So I was gonna say something, and then oh yeah, women covering their hair. I thought this was kind of an interesting topic, and this is probably a go nowhere topic as well because people are just divided on it. Just so you guys know, I don't have an opinion on it. Sarah does not cover her head, so this isn't like I don't enforce this on my wife. I leave it to her discretion how she feels on this. If she feels that she's supposed to cover her head, then I would support it in this case. Um, but I the comment here by Mary that I thought this was interesting. She said, "This is something I've wondered about. I also don't see it in Torah about women having to cover her hair. I don't see either, just so we all understand. But I do see that historically it was done. My family is Middle Eastern, and I know women cover their hair, but it is mainly in the Islam religion, not Christian in current days. That may be so, but when I would travel through the Middle East, I was really taken back that most women that I would see in the middle in the not just the Middle East, the Mediterranean, think of like the Greek Orthodoxy, Russian Orthodox Church, man, they were covering their heads. In fact, a lot of these churches I would go to this day, they still have women and men separate, and they go to the opposite ends. Women separate, women worship on one end, and men worship on the other. So I just wanted to point out that, see, here in the West, we're raised, obviously very American, duh, and surrounded by Hollywood and all these ideas, and so some of these things are very weird to us, But you go to these other cultures, and it's just very, very different uh, how they go about doing this stuff.
Hey, Noel, this is Marianne. I will add about the head covering. You're right about the Orthodox. I was raised Aramaic Orthodox, or actually Syrian Orthodox, which is similar to Aramaic. But in the churches, it's funny because sometimes we go up. Well, I don't go to the church anymore, but we used to go up to the altar to receive communion, and there would be like the elderly women giving head coverings, and so you would have to cover your head as walking up. So it is something I've always wondered about because and yeah, we are here now. I'm first generation born here, but my family that was in the Middle East, even still they don't cover, maybe inside the church they did. But I this is one of the things that I wonder. I see a disconnect between like ancient days and now. And looking into like all of the millennial kingdom stuff, I just kind of wonder if there's some kind of like disconnect after that. Like, was there some kind of disconnect after with all the deception, that there's just something that we're missing that everybody knew back then was maybe common knowledge, but now as the times go on and we're more in this age of deception, is there something that we're just kind of missing contextually? Because even if you look back, and I can't remember, and I'm not really good with years, but like you'll see women it was more common to be covered with their head, whether it was like a fancy hat or something, but coming up to now, it's just not commonly done. So it's interesting. It's just, my thoughts and observations, but I've wondered about that.
Well, I fully agree with what you're saying that there is missing information from the past, and I don't doubt that for a second. No, I'm not coming down. So all the women out there listening, I am not. I made this clear. I am not judging any woman who makes either decision. All right, but one of the historical realities is that if you just go 120 years back, you go to the 1800s, we're talking post mud flood. You look at women, they covered their heads. They tied their hair up like, they let your hair down, you would be a prostitute. 100 years ago. You wear your hair down, you're a prostitute. And it was the World War II generation really that started getting really like, crazy with their hair and stuff like that and it's funny, it's like, so you look at like the 1890s, they still had the big dresses, the women, and they covered their hair and their heads with a hat or something. And what started happening? They started letting their hair down and started showing some ankles, and then all of a sudden we're at the French bikini, baby. It just boom. It just you take it an inch, you go a mile, and it just everything falls apart. So, and I'm just showing you some observations out there. I'm not like condemning anyone. I'm just saying this is kind of how it happened. This is how it works, and um, but I think it helps to put in some perspective when we're having this discussion that all of human history would have looked at us, getting so uptight about, like you gotta. What are you saying? I gotta cover, my hair. It's like they would have gone like, "What are you? I'm sorry. I'm sorry to say this, but they would have been like, "Are you a prostitute?" Like, it just that historically, that's what it was. You let down your hair, and a guy's like, "Ooh, she's loose. Maybe I can." She's looking for something. So, again, that's just the reality of history. And yeah, yeah. So
I
I
can
really
change
one
the
thing I really
subject.
appreciate. Well, yeah, I keep putting my foot in my mouth. I'll let you change the subject, but I'll say this. One thing I really do appreciate about my wife is that I have watched her, in the 20 something years we've been married, where she like when we go swimming and stuff. I really appreciate that she. Um, I've never been someone who just enforces things on her. Like you can't go to the house unless you do this or that. I've always tried to just kind of guide her spiritually and show her what I'm learning and stuff like that. And it's really neat to see her cover up out in public and not show things off and I just I appreciate about that. I see a very godly woman in her and how she acts publicly, and so just want to commend that. But anyways, go ahead, Josh.
Yeah, just to touch on that subject as a like a man who's like seeking for that, it's a perfect red flag when you see a profile of someone like online or something like that, and they just have like lots of bikini pictures, and you're just like, wow, you like don't care about other people lusting after you. It's I would say a fairly good indicator of yeah, what you said about your own wife, which is what you would respect in a wife. You're like, well, would I want my wife showing that kind of stuff online? Um, so to get away from that subject, actually, I had kind of a question. I know people, we may have ex-mil or military members in the group or listening, but 9.5 and 9.6 kind of talk about like shedding the blood or killing, like shedding the blood of your brother and this kind of stuff. And I'm wondering, did you or Michael get into anything about like how that fits into what happens after, like, where Yah commands his people to go, oh, go and kill those. Are they not considered brothers, or like, is there some kind of like exception to the rule? Because it seems like almost like you shouldn't kill people who are in the camp or who are part of the tribe, but outside of that, it's like, yeah, that's fine, especially if you're commanded to. It's definitely okay, but it just doesn't seem like there's a very clear line as like, well, yeah, don't kill your brother, but also, don't kill random person trying to kill you across that, you know, line or over on the other side of no man's land. So if you guys had comments or thoughts about that, I think that'd be cool.
Well, my comment on that, and just so you guys know, I mean, I'm happy for other people to talk. I don't want to just take up the time. And what you asked is a very good question. This is one of those things that is put out there that bothers a lot of people because the the 10 words actually say do not kill. It doesn't say do not murder. It says do not kill. And what I think that Josh just got at, maybe purposely or inadvertently, is pretty spot on. My If I could sum this up in my understanding is that um, you are not to kill. Well, it does say that they're created in the image of Yah. Okay, not to kill. That's what makes killing so wrong. So that would imply non-covenant members, but there is a distinction within Scripture that, like, if people are covenant breakers, we're talking adultery, these kind of things, that's or very perverse sexual acts, they are to be put down. You are to kill them. And so I would say that that seems to be so. Like when he's bringing them into Canaan, he tells them to kill the inhabitants. And people will say, "Well, this is this is a genocide, all this kind of stuff." Well, it's the fact is that they were. This is where we kind of touch on this a little bit tonight. The Canaan, Ham's son, Canaan, through incest, is now running this place that is trying to steal the inheritance from the Most High. They're there as Satan's seed to block Satan's inheritance. I mean, not Satan, Yahuwah's inheritance, and so they're commanded to go wipe them out. They are clearly not in the covenant, and so I would think that that would be a good indicator of that for Yah's people. That like, for example, we were having this discussion earlier today in the Discord group about guns and, should we shoot people in self-defense and this kind of stuff, and how does that work out with martyrdom, and is martyrdom what we should aspire for or not, or persecution and so on and so forth. And everyone has different opinions on this, but the fact of the matter is that the saints, go marching in, right? They follow the Yahusha in the clouds of glory, tens thousands of his saints, and they come in and they execute judgment, and they take out the bad guys. So there is clear reason to end life kill if it is um, if they are covenant breakers at this point.
There's a lot of covenant breakers out there then.
Yeah, no, there are. Yeah, so in the context of the land, all right, if you are living in the land, And there are people. This can guys go into eternity too, right? And I know Rob has brought this up in the past and asked a question: in eternity, are people still allowed to rebel and sin? I hope I never do, but that's the question. What if that is still a possibility? Their fate is going to be known. Like they're going to be removed from the land, or they might be put down. And so, yeah, I mean that's just a reality, right? Adultery is one of the death penalties. It leads to death. So, but just in describing the cutoff, obviously, um, it says that within Torah that people kill others because there is hatred in their heart, and so that seems to be the other defining thing as well. I was just reading that recently. I think it was at the end of Numbers, and it talked about if there is no hatred in someone's heart and they kill someone, they're okay. And so one of the ways it defines that is if there is like maybe you have an axe, you're cutting down a tree, and the axe slips and it hits someone in the head, right? You didn't mean to kill them. But if you guys were to think about this in terms of capital punishment, like does anybody here actually want to have to kill someone? No, I don't. It would grieve my heart if I had to be a part of something where I actually had to take a life. Like somebody sinned a terrible sin, um, and they have to be put down. Maybe they murdered someone, and now this person has to be put down, and I have to be a part of the execution party. I'm in Israel stuff. Man, that would grieve my heart. I would hate to be a part of something like that. And so that seems to be the defining factor of of killing slash murder versus just killing. Man, I'm on the hot seat tonight. Hopefully, I'm.
Cyber, you keep unmuting your mic. Did you have something you want to say?
Yeah, we brought up nakedness, and I was curious on the concept of the reverse, the clothing. I'm working on a game mechanic, and I was thinking about medieval times and the clothes they used to wear, the textiles, the silk and the cloth and cotton, wool, and whatnot, and how appropriate that would be versus nowadays. And then having natural dyes versus synthetic dyes, obviously under the context of incorporating into a game. That's a side note. But how applicable is that nowadays? Not so much that it's like necessary to be kosher, but like it really got me thinking, wow, I really want to like utilize like pure clothes and dyes rather than the synthetics. Just out of love, of just the whole nature of the kosher environment to me is all out of love itself. So I'm curious how we think about that and if anybody has any good sources.
So,
No, a question was asked about the beard and the hair. I mean, does the Torah actually say that we have to grow a beard? Because I can't stand it. I mean, I keep my head and my face shaved always because I just can't stand hair because it's just too hot.
Yeah, so there's a lot of people in Torah that shave their face. And the popular image is that you grow your beard out. And it's just think about it, like Rob Skiba shaved, Zin Garcia shaves, my friend Chris Bailey shaves. He runs a big ministry. Um, and now I've had a beard ever since coming to Torah, but I do shave it. Like I keep it trim. I don't, there's been a couple times where I let it grow way out, like down to my chest, but then I keep it, but then I shave it, keep it pretty trim. Now, according to many in the Torah, I'm sinning for doing that. Now, to answer, I was just thinking about this today because it never says you have to grow a beard, but then there's the command that you are to not shave the corners of your beard. So by that, it would be like it's you could say, well, see, you're supposed to grow a beard, right? Now, my understanding, this is kind of going back to what we're talking about earlier tonight, is that my understanding of that passage is that what Yah does not want from us is to honor the other gods through our hairstyle, and to not worship the dead. All right. And I think really, because a lot of us would go like, what do you mean worshiping the dead or honoring the dead or whatever? But maybe a better example would be worshiping the gods. And throughout history, you look at different popular hairstyles in history, and they would honor the different gods. And what Yahuwah wants is us obviously to be a distinct people that doesn't do that. So, then that is kind of circular because it comes back in and go, well, I don't know. Like, who was it in here earlier? Oh, Bob. He was asking earlier this week, and he's like, if I give, he's asking a genuine question. He's like, if I give a bowl cut to my son, is that like honoring Mercury or something like that? See, those are all good questions to ask. But I don't believe that what Yah is actually asking is that you're to just let your hair, you're supposed to shave the top of your head like marine cut, and you're supposed to grow your beard out. And I've had Torah guys come to my house and they would explain that, the women better grow their pits out and their legs out, and the men better grow those beards out because everything else is just vanity, and you just must love yourself. I'm like, you gotta be kidding me! Like, like Yah is not asking us to be slobs. Like he's not asking us to be like a hairy people. When he says to be peculiar people, he doesn't say be hairy people. But again, this comes to each one of you. Each one of you needs to read that and come to your own conclusions. I, for one, feel that it is okay to grow my hair long on top or take scissors to it. That is not what he's getting after. So
Yeah, that would kind of nullify the Nazarene vow, wouldn't it? Isn't that just shaving everything? I mean, shave your head, shave your beard to do the Nazarite vow. And also, it could be something about goatees, shaping your beard into some pointy looking thing. So either you don't have a beard or you do have a beard and you just keep it trimmed.
I was gonna, I kind of mentioned it in the chat about, the Native Americans and finding out that your hair is like an antenna, right? And it's connected right to your head, your brain. And so I would say for the men too, the men were the ones that went out into nature and did stuff more, and having hair on your face you're going to be more sensitive to the things around you. So I don't think there's anything, and I know when I deep dove into studying this out that the literal from the Hebrew seems to mean you shouldn't you shouldn't mar your beard, which means you don't pull it out by the root, because they would do that in like you're saying, these pagan rituals where they would, they'd rip their garments, they'd pull their beard out to show their, sadness or whatever, or their anxiety. And so I think this idea of how you see the Hasidic Jews, they grow out their sideburns and those tendrils, I think, and again, so there's a misunderstanding even in 1 Corinthians 11 about them. People say it says that men shouldn't have long hair. Well, it doesn't say that. If you go back into the root word, it really points to this idea of men having like tended hair, tended tresses, or coiffed or styled, right? So if men are spending all this time, getting perms or dye, or they're cutting it in certain ways, and they're having to spend all this time with the gel, and to me that's because the reason is because you appear feminine. And so in some cultures, I think at the time it was translated this long hair because at the time long hair was equated with femininity. But the next verse goes on to say, and some people misinterpret that, where it says for the woman her hair is given her as a covering. Well, that word is not the same word where the word covering is used throughout the rest of the scripture. It's more like is given to her as a vesture or a mantle. So like if you think of a priest has a certain vesture, a judge has a certain vesture, it identifies them, right? You see a judge in a robe, that's a judge. You see a priest in a frock, that's a priest, right? So you see a woman, you see a person with long hair, that's a woman. That's or actually again, it's not just long hair, it's tended hair, styled hair. Her hair is given to her as part of her feminine identity. And so, she's allowed to, even though it says we shouldn't, as believers, we shouldn't be drawing attention to ourselves with a bunch of crazy braids and jewels and all that stuff, but it is part of a womanly feminine thing to beautify yourself and to, and your hair is part of your ornamentation. That being said, it also says that a woman's hair is her glory. And 1 Corinthians 29 says, no flesh shall glory before Yah. So if we have the people want, and I trust me, struggled with all of this as I searched it out and studied it, and I've come as soon as I kind of went in one direction in faith, he starts confirming stuff. You start getting your answers. And so if you really think about the priesthood was called, they had a uniform that they wore, and it was to protect them from the energy of the ark that they were going to encounter. And also, they were the priests, they're slaughtering animals. There's lots of energy things going on there. And so they covered their heads, they wore linen. All this is an energy thing. So now we are the priesthood. And so it says that woman is the glory of man, right? And man is the glory of Yahusha. So, and the hair is the glory of the woman. So when we present ourselves in the assembly, we want to be the glory of Yahusha. We should be presenting ourselves as one echad priesthood. So the woman covers her glory in her hair. She is also kind of hidden in her, if she's married, this is why lots of times if you really read it, it says veiled. Like you're not just supposed to just cover your hair. You're supposed to cover yourself in a sense. This is why, you've got these cultures with all the burqas and all this stuff, because they go to the extreme. But in the assembly, it's really, we're supposed to, it's symbolic of presenting ourselves, putting ourselves in the right authority, presenting ourselves as an echad priesthood that is the glory of Yahusha. One whole new man as the priests before him. That's what I've gotten from it, among other things.
Sounds like you nailed it pretty good to me. I'm in agreement.
Recently, I was looking at some kind of a job, and like they were like, okay, as long as you shave your beard to like a half inch, and I was like thinking about it. So now I got to think more about it, recently because it just comes up out of sight, out of mind. And like, okay, so I'm at the point where I could do that. I understand. I got peace about it, but I'm like, I just don't want to. It's perfectly fine just that way too. But yeah, I like how it was mentioned about the Native American and feeling more in tune spiritually, and that really did take a big part of my decision not to. And it's like I don't really need the job. Money's a little tight, but I really want to be connected. So that's I don't know. That was just where I went with it. Live action experience there. Um, yeah.
I got a quick question, Noel. And this is back to Romans. So you mentioned at the end of the chat that we're kind of waiting on whether or not Paul is pro or against circumcision. So what we've kind of figured out up until this point is that Paul is certainly pro Torah. He's advocating for Torah. He's advocating for Torah obedience. But you're saying that the final kind of like nail in the coffin to put that to bed is if he's pro or against circumcision. And if he's against it, then there's something else at work here. So are you saying that like our quote unquote judgment of Paul, or like our final kind of like, hey, this whole Paul thing, of course there are other scriptures, there are other letters and stuff like that that may or may not be attributed to Paul, or may or may not be written by him, but that we're still kind of waiting for that final kind of like circumcision is like the big one. Is he gonna pass this test, or is he gonna not? And if not, then I guess we'll have to figure out what happens then, right?
Okay, yeah. So the point I was making is that, all right. So you come over to Camp Torah, and um, what people in Torah fail to recognize. I have pointed this out so many times that the most scandalous thing, the most controversial thing, is that they obey Torah. Like to the rest of the world, when we climb out of this bubble that we live in on the internet, the rest of the world, they're like, "That's pretty scandalous, dude. Like, what's up with that?" Right? Paul, but then in Torah, when you start questioning Paul, people in the Torah, they start freaking out and all this kind of stuff. And so many of the people I've talked to, they're like, no, no, I get this all the time. No, he did keep Torah. How dare you insinuate that he's not? And, any true, follower of Messiah would know that. And I'm like, okay, okay, okay. And then you start talking to them and they're like, yeah, he did away with circumcision. I'm like, what? What what do you mean? Then he didn't keep Torah. Like, okay, so right now, I am reading commentary by a very interesting Torah guy who, again, he says, "Oh, Paul kept Torah. He kept Torah. He advocated Torah, but he did away with circumcision." I'm like, "Hello, you just want it like hello, like Biff, like hello, butthead, whatever." Like, you just want to knock him on the head with your knuckles because it's like, it, as James makes clear, you break one law in Torah, you break the whole thing. You can't, or as I point out with Yahusha, right? That you break one of the least of the commands and tell others to do the same, you will be the least in the kingdom. Paul is not exempt. Okay, so my point is that I feel that in Acts, I made the case that according to the narrative of the book of Acts, that what Luke is saying is that all these accusations that Paul did away with the Torah or the laws or the traditions of Moses, at the core of which was circumcision, that he told people not to circumcise. He said all that is they're false rumors. It's not real. It's false testimony, right? And so I'm content with that. In the book of Romans, and I think I'm making the case, very solid, at least content to my mind, that the whole worldview, Paul's entire worldview was the Torah. In fact, one of the things they will not tell you in churches, pastors, is that it is well debated among scholars that one of the determining factors of whether or not a letter is legitimate by Paul or not is his level of discussing Torah. He doesn't need to sign it. It doesn't need to say an epistle by Paul. It's kind of like how you can tell a Van Gogh from a Monet, right? Monet never signed his paintings. Van Gogh never signed his paintings. Leonardo da Vinci never signed his work. We know it's their work because it's their style, like their hand strokes that we just know, right? And one of Paul's obsessions is talking about the Torah. Um, and so I am concluded in my mind that the book of Romans makes absolutely no sense. It has no moral standing if the Torah is not in his worldview. He places it as the highest moral authority. It's very clear. He argues for it. He's not arguing against it. The question is that people will still say, but circumcision, right? I mean, and so I stated tonight that I directed us back to Acts that if Luke is correct, then he is not arguing against circumcision. Sometimes it really looks like he is, though, and that's really what it comes down to. If people have to make up their own minds on that, it's no sweat off my back. If someone says I don't follow Paul because he did away with circumcision, I'm like, okay. I mean, I won't disagree with that. I'm not going to get into it. I'm not going to give into a. Um, I have fear when it comes to Yahushua's words that I'm not going to teach against the law. At least not my understanding of it. We got into this discussion about hair and stuff like that tonight, and that's why I try to tell everyone, look, you need to read this for yourself and come to your conclusions. This is my understanding of it, right? I don't know if that answered your question, but
So
uh,
just to kind of continue on that, Noel, is it then possible that Paul is pro Torah, but he's anti circumcision, and in that way, like because it says like anybody who like violates this but and teaches others to do so, the least of these. Well, I don't think circumcision is necessarily the least, but it doesn't say that they're not going to be part of the kingdom. It just says they'll be considered least. So is it
right.
possible that maybe Paul was mistaken on circumcision, or was kind of catering to the people he was writing to, and therefore is considered least, and in that way we just have to say, hey, you know what? He was wrong about this, and Torah and all all of Scripture and other covenants invalidate what he's claiming about circumcision.
Well, yeah. So my answer is twofold. Okay, it's twofold. If he is saying that, then he is wrong. Paul is wrong. Yes, he's wrong because uh, it, like I pointed out tonight, the instructions are very clear, and Torah never says, nor do any prophets in the Tanakh say, nor does Yahusha say, oh, by the way, somewhere down the line, this guy's going to come along, he's going to write a letter, and just listen to what he says. He's going to do away with his command, and it's all good. It's all good. That never says that, right? However, on the other hand, is I'm kind of giving him the benefit of the doubt, and um, this has been seen as a big act of betrayal by a lot of the anti-Paul crowd. I think that it's been very helpful for me to be on both sides of the argument, to see the pro Paul argument, to be on that at one point, and then be on the anti Paul argument, and really see both ends and to believe both ends, and to really search these things out. And I could see how all the different arguments work. Now, I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt because as I think I was really trying to hammer over and over and over again over the last 4 weeks, is that when um, he was speaking to a crowd where man, I phrased this so many times. The Yahudim, he made the case the Yahudim didn't even believe in Elohim to begin with. They believed in them. They believed in themselves. They believed that Elohim owed them something, that they deserved to go to heaven. It was the same way with Yehusha. They felt the same way, and he called them the sons of Satan, right? Um, and so they're extremely jealous of seeing all these goyim come flocking into the covenant. And one thing that makes them jealous is that they're not the ones doing it. It's not by their power; it's by Elohim's power. They hate this. The Yahudim, they hate this, and they're like turning their noses up in them. They're like, "You're not righteous. You guys are sinners. Look at you. You look at you don't get the law like we do. We're morally superior than you. You guys are nothings, right?" And so Paul is coming to as an advocate, going like, I got guys over here. Yeah, they're not circumcised, but they keep the law. They actually believe in Elohim and they keep the Torah way more than you guys do. And I think that that's really the argument here. I think that when you study Acts 15, which is what Romans is going off of, is it's Yaakov's words. Um, you have the Pharisees there, by the way, the believing Pharisees, and they're straight out saying you've got to be circumcised. Peter and Yaakov, they never disagree with that. They're like, yeah, they need to be circumcised, but they agree on the four things. I think it's four things, like don't the blood and the different things like that. Uh, and Yaakov straight out says, you know what? We will bring them each Sabbath to the tabernacles, to the synagogue, so on and so forth, and they will begin reading Moses and start reading. That's what they wanted. Because the point of the Torah is that it's supposed to show if we qualify to be covenant members. Each one of us is tried by the Torah, and either we fall away from it, or we become Torah terrorists, or we get it right. And that's one of the things that it can't be. And this is one of the problems when a lot of people like try to go to Torah communities, and they're like it's all about appearance and and the pressure of doing things a certain way, having the right kind of beard, all these kind of different things, because you're pleasing man. And if you're a righteous person, you're not going to shave your beard, right? You're going to have this certain Hebrew look, and your tassels a certain length, and all these different things. And that's, I think, what Paul was against. He was like, look, they're they believe, they have the faith of Abraham. He's already given them the Holy Spirit. If they are truly believers, if they are truly in the covenant with the Most High, that will come to fruition. We will see that in time, and as they mature and grow. That's one of the tensions we all have to live in: the wheat and the tares. Um, he was he Paul was giving people permission to be tares. I think that's what he was doing. And it's kind of one of the things we kind of have to let happen. Does that make sense? That's my understanding of this. That's
Yeah.
kind of where I'm at.
No, I had another question. It's kind of a little bit of an aside. Maybe it's off topic. Why does Yahusha be all like, "Hey, man, I'm going to separate the sheep from the goats"? Goats are like awesome and hilarious, and they're anybody who owns goats. I mean, they're silly little guys. Like they're also cool. Like they can do all kinds of stuff. Whereas sheep, they just like graze, and you literally have to take care of them really a lot for them to do anything productive. And goats, you can do all kinds of stuff with goats, and they'll have a ton of fun, and they'll amuse you for your entire lifetime. So I'm curious what your thoughts are on, or anybody's thoughts for that matter, on, hey, what's with the goats and why all the hate for the goats? I mean, they're amazing.
Well, if someone else wants to answer that, go ahead. But I will say quickly that there is an article on my website that a guest writer wrote. She is goat husbandry. I guess she's not a shepherd, but she raises goats, husbandry. And she wrote a really good article about saying how awesome goats are. But then she asked the same question: why all the hate towards goats in the Bible, right? Like they're not evil, they're actually really cool creatures. I love goats. I love their personalities myself. But obviously they're identified with Satanism and Beelzebub and all that. But does anybody else have anything they want to say in the sheep and the goats? So it's not just me talking all night.
I just know that there's a scripture. I can't think off the top of my head. Is like during Pesach, it said that you can bring a lamb or a goat. Like it's not just strictly for lambs that we can eat. But I'm just gonna look for the scripture to back up what I'm saying here.
Well,
Also,
while she looks that up, a couple, maybe 3 Passovers ago now, I can't remember. Yeah, 3 Passover ago, we actually had goat for Passover, and we went to a Torah goat husbandry farmer about 40 miles away from us, and we got a goat.
it also might have something to do with the goat and man hybrid that the Nephilim created. I think there's a tie-in on that. Also, I want to comment about Paul as far as the circumcision. I think Paul was pro-circumcision for sure. If he followed Torah, which everything we read so far says he did, he had to do that. The problem was that the Jews of the time figured that the Gentiles should automatically have to do every single thing that they did. But what they didn't understand is that the Jews had had the Torah for thousands of years. A Gentile may not have known anything whatsoever about the Torah. So basically, what Paul was saying is, hey, let's don't give them all these things to do at one time. Let's do the important things first. And then later on, as they become Torah observants and their hearts are circumcised, then they will automatically do the circumcision and all the other things that the Torah calls for. Just like us today, when we are following the Christianity churches of the world and we are totally against the Torah, and then we begin to learn the Torah, we slowly slide into that. We're not just going to automatically be 100% Torah observant and know everything, because we don't know everything. And I think Paul was giving them the same benefit of the doubt to the Gentiles, and that's why he's basically called the apostle to the Gentiles, is because he was slowly moving them into that Torah observance.
Yeah, spot on, 100%. I agree. What Paul was, again, to reiterate, what Paul was doing was he was stressing that we are to please Elohim, not man. It had to be Yahuwah doing it. Working through us, not man working through us. That is his whole point. And so that we have to live in that tension of living amongst the wheat and tares. And there's going to be many people in the congregation that are the tares and many of the wheats and the goat and the sheep. And that's something that we all have to uh, search our own hearts. Especially it gets almost hyperdrive in these truther communities where it's like, who's the spook and who's the agents and, who's, working for whom. And we're all like trying to like look and inspect other people. And it's like, we're always trying to wake people up and prove them wrong. And it's like, man, we need to remember that like this is about searching our own hearts out and, introspection. I had something else I was going to say about Paul. Oh yeah, the other thing to point out about Paul that really has struck me through this is that if he really was leading people away from the Torah, if that was his intent, then why is he arguing with the Yahudim? Why are they arguing with him? If he is seriously just creating his own religion, they would be like, okay, fine. They wouldn't like it was the fact that it was clearly the fact that he was bringing in all these Gentiles and they were so upset by it. And because they wanted their system, set up. And so the fact that he's constantly arguing with him is more proof in my mind that he is keeping the Torah, because he's always talking about it and saying, no, you guys are the ones that are misunderstanding what what it is. He's not speaking against the commands. He's trying to get at the heart of the issue of why they don't believe in the Torah to begin with. Anyways, it is it's getting late tonight, guys, and I enjoyed this conversation. I'll give it a few more minutes if anybody else has anything else. But other than that, I will be signing out.
Just wanted
Yeah,
to share that mess. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think they were jealous. Not only were they jealous, but they just thought that these Yahudim were inferior. They just were not worthy to be on the same level as they were.
Yes, absolutely.
So it's actually in Exodus 12 where it talks about the Passover lamb, but it says in 12:5 it says that your lamb shall be an unblemished male, a year old, and you may take it from the sheep or from the goats. You could eat the lamb or the goat or a goat for your Passover lamb. I think the reason why like there's just such a hate on like the goats and stuff, I think it kind of goes back to Yom Kippur with the two goats where the one was led out into the wilderness, and I think that that's where Satanists kind of take is that like the Bezalel being let out into the wilderness, and that the other goat was the one that was taken for the slaughter. And I think that that's where the whole, where Satan takes a half side of it. But anyways, I mean, I don't think that we have any reason to hate on goats because we are allowed to eat them and use that as one of our Passover lambs. You could have a lamb or a goat.
So obviously, the big difference between sheep and goat, it's pretty self-evident. Like, no, goats are not evil, but if Yahusha is our shepherd, a shepherd, you can't really be. It's very hard to be a shepherd of goats because goats, they kind of go their own way and they're a bit more stubborn. Where sheep are very dependent upon the shepherd. Um, my I I've said this before. I'll give a goat story and a sheep story. When we were going through Europe, and you would spend a month in each place, like a month in Ireland, a month in Scotland, a month in England or Great Britain, a month in wherever. And we were going around, and we encountered a lot of sheep. Like we would just be living on like these pastures with sheep and everything. And I used to love the sheep, um, and I would try to like tiptoe, like walk on eggshells around them because they were so fickle. And they would just look up at you, like one of them, and their ears would pop up, and they'd be like, "Wah," and like all of them, like 100 of them would run away. And it's like, oh, you're just trying to walk through the woods, and it's like, oh man, we just like stampede of sheep running away because they're like, "You're not my shepherd. I don't know who you are. You're a stranger, right? Stranger danger," and they just run. And that's the idea of a sheep that they're, in the truther community, we call people sheep because, well, that's what they are. They follow the shepherd. They follow Dr. Fossey, blah blah blah. Hopefully, we are the sheep that follow Yahusha, right? Well, goats don't do that. Now, my favorite goat story was I was in Yellowstone National Park, and I was back in my photographer days, and I wanted to go capture the wild goats there, the mountain goats, not the bighorn sheep, but the wild mountain goats. And I asked the ranger like where I can find them. And they said, well, they're really hard to find, but if it's like this. If you go on this like 10-mile hike this way up this mountain, you might find them up there. We've seen reported activity up there recently. So I'm like, okay. So I chanced it. I based a whole day. I hiked up and I'm on this high mountain up in Yale, way away from people, and I could see on the other mountain, all of a sudden the mountain started moving. I'm like, it was like it looked like a skirt that was moving. I'm like, those are the goats. And I watched as the skirt moved and it started coming up my mountain. And then all of a sudden there was one goat, then two goats, and three goats, and all of a sudden there's like 100 goats around me. And they're surrounding me on all sides. And they started coming up and they started taking a fascination to me. And they started coming up to me and they started like rubbing their horns on me. And and then I'm starting to get a little afraid because they started fighting for my affection. And the goats started ramming each other to get the other goats away from me, and some of them started turning on me and started ramming me in the butt, and I'm like, "This could go bad really." I was on a cliff, guys. I'm like, "This could go bad really fast." But yeah, goats are obviously I'm still alive, so I didn't fall off the mountain, but I did get rammed in the butt several times, and those suckers hurt. Got it. I don't think it was like purple bruises or anything, but yeah, they had some force. But yeah, that's my goat story. I love goats. They're wonderful, stubborn creatures. And in fact, there's a passage in Job where Yahuwah says that he takes special pride in the wild ass because he says he's untamed. And that Yahuwah takes he's like, I did that. Like I created that creature that like, how stubborn donkeys are and you can't pull them on the rope. I did that. That's all me. So it kind of shows a little bit of Yah's character and so yeah, goats are not evil. They're just kind of, you know, a part of who he is and what he thinks about. So
I think the key that you just hit on there was that about the stubbornness of goats, and when it says that we're separating the sheep from the goats, is that we're separating like the stubbornness of people who don't want to follow him and want to just live in the world in themselves, and then the sheep who do want to be
right.
shepherded and be followed by him. That's kind of how I would view that scripture.
Yeah, yeah, right. There's nothing, nothing. It's kind of like guys, like an owl. Like, yes, I know the Bohemian Grove uses owls and the occult and stuff, but there's nothing evil about an owl, right? Like we put these character traits on these animals sometimes that owls are not, actually evil. I have these owls, nesting owls in our house, and I go out sometimes at sunset looking for them, and they are so beautiful when I find them. And like they'll see me and they'll like, owls, they're very interested in you. They'll look down with big eyes and just stare at you, and it's so haunting. But yeah, beautiful creatures as well.